Good afternoon, everyone. It's 5 p.m. and as chair of the Historic Preservation Board, I'm going to call the meeting to order. The first thing is for us to pledge allegiance to the flag, which is in back of us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we start, we're very happy to say that we now have 8 of 9 positions filled on the board, and we'd like to have the 2 new board members just say a few words about themselves. Shane?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Shane Taylor. New to this board. I live in Fort Lauderdale. I've lived in Fort Lauderdale for the last 5 years, and about 2.5 of those most recently in Sailboat Bend. So good. Appreciate you for having me.
Thank you. Sonia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Sonia Masti. I'm a native of South Florida, born in Broward County. Did spend about 10 years in Atlanta, where I worked for the Atlanta Development Authority on a lot of interesting redevelopment projects. Currently work for MAPE, which is construction chemicals. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to both of you. And first item is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or would like to make a motion? Do I hear a motion? As chairman, I can't make the motion. So when I ask for a motion, somebody else has to.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. So the minutes are from the last meeting are approved. The first item for consideration is case number UDP HP 23020 930 Tequesta Street. And before we start, I just want to ask if anyone has any disclosures, whether you've visited the property or driven by or not. Let's start at this end. Okay.
No disclosure. I spoke to their attorney and to the owner today.
Okay.
I spoke with their counsel as well, and I walk and drive by the property all the time.
No disclosures.
I am recusing myself.
I spoke with the applicant's attorney as well.
No disclosure.
I've also spoken with the applicant's attorney and visited by the property.
Do you want to do the swearing in for everyone, Arthur? Or
Yes. Now, let's
okay.
do the swearing in.
If you're going to speak to the board tonight, can you please raise your right hand and stand? And I'll ask you a question. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a representative for the applicant?
Thank you, Board. Stephanie Toothaker on behalf of the applicant. I don't think this is my presentation. It doesn't look right. Is this ours? There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. I apologize. Well, first of all, thank you. We're very happy to be here. As you may or may not be aware, I know that the board members who've been here before this evening know we got deferred 3 times. Twice because there weren't enough board members to vote on this project, yea or nay, and once because the board didn't have a quorum. So we are more than thrilled to finally be here this evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I know you've probably seen at the various times that we've been here, we've had a large number of people who were here to actually speak in favor of the application. I don't know that all of them were willing to re-rally again to be here. So I'm going to just ask you to take that into consideration. We did at the back of the presentation, you'll see I did add a large number of letters of support. So the applicant is Kurt Stange, who's here with his wife and his 2 beautiful boys. And they are residents of Sailboat Bend district, and they do live at 930 Tequesta Street. So they are homeowners. They're not investors or builders. This is their home that they live in with their family. So we've been at this for quite some time, working with the city of Fort Lauderdale, and this is a request for a demolition of a property. The property itself is not historic. It is not a historic property. I think that's a really important point. It's in a district which is considered historic, but the property is not historic. So it is at 930 Tequesta. And I know you're very familiar with it. I think a lot of you live in the district and certainly are familiar with Tequesta. So it is a waterfront property, and the property, as you can see, is very long and skinny, and it actually faces. This is like literally in the worst location, because I want to be able to look at the board, but I can't see this. So I apologize for my back being to you.
You can turn the mic around.
Can I turn around? That's there. Thank you. That's so much better. Thank you. So again, it is a single-family property. It is not designated historic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about FEMA because that's a really important point I want to talk about. So the request that's before you this evening is a request to demolish the entire property. Very importantly, the entire property is not the contributing structure. It's just a piece of it. So this is the original structure here outlined in green. Everything else you see on this property is not something that would need to come before this board for a request. That's all something that Kurt and his family could demolish without approval of this board. The piece that is original is this, what we've highlighted in green, and it's not meant to be exact. It's just based on the plans that we got from the city, what we estimate to be the original structure, and based on, obviously, the family that lives there. I think they can easily tell you what portions of the building are original. So these are the plans for the property, and I think it's hard to see. They're very old. It's actually quite impressive that we have these, because a lot of times these plans just don't exist anymore. But I think if you look very carefully, one of the things that you'll note is that the building that we're showing you pictures of actually doesn't look like this. So many modifications have been made to this structure over the years that some of the most important pieces of this are long gone. So you can see here there's a screened-in porch that doesn't exist anymore. I think some windows have changed. The location of the door has changed. The gable's a little different. There's a lot that's very different today versus what was originally built in 1940. So a certificate of appropriateness for demolition requires that the designated landmark, site, or property within the district no longer contributes to the historic district. We believe that we meet that qualification. The property or building no longer has significance as a historic, architectural, or archaeological landmark. It never met that anyway. The building itself is not designated historic. And the demolition or redevelopment is of major benefit to a historic district. And I think we can even address that one. So the house is not designated historic, and the house itself has no historical significance. The architect is unknown. The building no longer has significance because major building repairs were made, which are inconsistent with the original home. And the original design and significant additions were conducted over many years, which do not, in fact, comply with the Secretary of Interior guidelines. So the city uses structure evaluation. I know you've read your staff report, so you know what the city is saying about that. But we believe that a majority of the house, as I said, the house itself is not historic, and a majority of it doesn't comply with any of the guidelines. We've also done a full structural report, and that's part of the package that we submitted to the city. And there's a couple of takeaways from that, but notably, there's a lack of continuous load path between the roof, wall, and foundations. The current wall and floor sheathing would not resist shear forces. So if a hurricane were to come through, but they're saying basically is they don't think that this house would withstand a hurricane. I think if you look at the pictures when I get to those in a few minutes, I think you'll see why. The roof framing is not adequately restrained. The window and door framing are undersized and don't have sufficient connectors, and the interior stem wall foundations were deficient when they were constructed, not surprising for a building that's 1940. So these are just some images that are part of the backup that's in your staff report. And these are just the images that go along with the elements that I just raised. I think most importantly, and I know because I've spoken to some of you, I'm suffering from this myself. Most importantly, with rising tides, this house is just way too low. It's too low. It's at risk for flooding. And even if Kurt and his family were to demolish those portions that are not, contributing, and were to do an addition, the house would be, a new elevation would be at 7 feet. This house, most of this house is, the majority of it is at about 5 feet, excuse me. So it's already too low. And about every year, FEMA raises the base floor elevation for new home structures. And when you build in the city of Fort Lauderdale or anywhere, quite frankly, in Southeast Florida, this is what you have to deal with. And so, I actually live in a neighborhood that's not designated historic, but it does flood. I've flooded myself. My home flooded because I made the mistake of trying to save a portion of the original structure. It's just too low. So I've said to Kurt, I'm like, unfortunately, I'm your poster child for what not to do. So I thought it was also relevant for this board. These are some other applications that came before this board. So there's a lot of precedent here. So these are all, the next several slides are all images of structures that came before this board for certificate of demolition that this board granted. So the first one is at 419 Southwest 8th Terrace. So this was also a contributing structure, but the board granted a certificate of demolition. 934 Waverly Road. This was also granted a demolition for a portion of the property. It was also considered contributing. 1001 Southwest 4th Street, certificate of appropriateness for demolition was approved. And then there was also a companion application for a new home that was granted. 419 Southwest 8th Terrace also was granted a certificate of appropriateness for demolition. 1001 Southwest 2nd Street, same thing. 1215 West Las Olas Boulevard also was granted a certificate of appropriateness. And we actually don't have an application pending before you for a new home, but we wanted to show this to you. This is sort of an early rendering. And one of the things that I think is really important about this is it shows you in the context of what we like about the house, about the original structure, shows you that the direction that Kurt and his family would go in would really respect some of those elements that are indicative of the original structure. Again, this is not before you this evening, and this is just a conceptual rendering at this point. Anything would have to come back before this board for approval. So here's the house that we're talking about. You can see, as I mentioned, it's very long and skinny. What you're seeing on the right is a carport that is not part of the original structure. In fact, most of what you see here, there is a very small piece of it. You can see how very skinny it is. It's really just that very little tiny front facade, and so many changes were made to that. You can see there's no screened-in porch. That was part of the original proposal. I think the door is different. The windows are different. There's just a lot that has been changed over the years. So here's just some elements. This is a portion of the house that's actually outside the original home. This is one of the many additions that were made over the years. Again, more images of the back of the house and where the pool is. More images. None of this is the original. That's really where the original screened-in porch was. So that's obviously been enclosed.
Can I ask you a quick question about the slide earlier about the front of the house?
This one?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is it, that whole small portion in front, is that the original, or does the original step back and include that next section?
Well, it's hard to read the plans, but my read of the plans is that section that you're seeing there was the screened-in porch.
That was the screened-in porch. Okay.
That's my belief based on but I'm not an architect, and I'm reading very old plans that are hard to read, but that's my impression of what they've done over the years. So we did a lot of public outreach on this proposal, and we have a lot of letters of support. So what we've done is we've shown you here just in map view all the letters of support that we have and where they live. So you can see these are not people from, other parts of the city. These are people that actually are from Sailboat Bend that are in support of this application. And I just go through them, and we have a large number of them. I think last count we were at 20 letters of support. And that concludes my presentation, and I know Kurt and his family are here. I don't know, Kurt, if you want to say something real quickly, and we have, I think we've got some people in the audience too that are here to speak in favor.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt Stange for the record, and I think like Stephanie kind of mentioned, we moved up here in 2021, in 2021, And we fell in love with Fort Lauderdale. We fell in love with Sailboat Bend. And so, you know, my wife and I have 2-year-old twins. Their birthday's on the 18th of this month. So we're really looking to plan down roots. And, you know, we bought this house not expecting to love the area probably as much as we do. And we really, really, really like it. So, you know, we've put a considerable effort to, you know, go through to build a home that our family can grow into and we can live into for the next, you know, several decades, and be able to become part of this community in Fort Lauderdale and in Sailboat Bend as well. So that's really why we're doing it. You know, we're not developers. We're not looking to flip. We're not looking to sell. Like, this is a really a long-term plan for us. So we're hoping that you guys are understanding of, you know, us and our future, and we want to be part of this community. Any
Great.
questions I can answer for you guys at all? Or?
I'm sure they'll come up during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is anyone from the public would like to speak? Please stand up on this matter. Okay. Please. Yeah, for this matter, sure.
Hi, everybody.
Could you do me a
I hate
favor and
tall
just,
guys.
excuse me, could you just turn the podium a little around so you're speaking, no, the other way, so you're speaking to the board and the audience. So the audience
hear?
doesn't see your back, okay.
Okay. My name is Ron Nistico Palomara, and I'm probably the most qualified person to speak about this issue. 35 years ago, I went to the first meetings of designating Sailboat Bend as historic. I remember those meetings well. Everybody was so elated and let's get it done, let's get it done. And I'm really, I have to read my notes, I'm really affected by this decision, maybe more than anyone, because I live directly next to them. I live at 922 Tequesta Street, right next to them. I've lived there for 35 years. And I hope this goes through because they're the third couple that have lived there and they outgrew the home. And I just don't want to keep doing this. I'm getting older, you know. What I was making some notes before, and I told us another commissioner about 10 years ago, he was driving around because the same thing, they were going to do the same thing to a house across the street. And there were 2 houses, real houses across the street, and they were torn down about 15 years ago. And now in their place, there are 8 townhouses going up, and they're beautiful. The old houses were nothing good to look at. I mean, they really weren't. And I told the commissioner, just because it's old and historic, it doesn't mean it's nice. It doesn't mean it benefits the community. I'm sure this house, which I've lived next to, is not that big a deal. Sorry. It's just not that big a deal. It's too small. They can't live in it. And my house isn't going anywhere. The first mayor of Lauderdale lived in my house, built in 1913. I love it. It's 2 stories. But their house looks like a garage or a cabin next to my house. And across the street, there's a Section 8. Everybody gets along. It's just a great community. I mean, it really is. A great neighborhood. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions?
If they come up, we'll certainly
Thanks.
see you in the audience. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this? Please.
Before I get started, I just want to warn all of you that don't know me from the HBB, my service on that. I tend to speak a long time. So I'm going to stop jabbering as fast, and I'm going to have to read this as fast as I can.
And you're also chair of this board.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I'm here to ask for your support by granting a certificate of appropriateness for demolition for this applicant's home currently labeled contributing. It's logical, it's fair, and it's consistent with the HPB's recent decision to permit demolition of 700 Southwest 4th Street near Cooley's Landing, now labeled non-contributing. While the labeling of the two properties is different, they are remarkably similar in so many significant ways. They both have to contend with the rising water on the New River. They are both vintage World War II structures. They both suffer from multiple additions and alterations over the past years, and they both need to be structurally compliant with current building codes and FEMA regulations to fight the dangers of climate change and satisfy reluctant insurance companies, as well as mortgage lenders and their requirements. The puzzling aspect for me, as former chair of HPB, is this. Does this home deserve the classification of contributing structure, along with the other 162 properties so designated in the historic district? My research helps me to find that it falls short of many of the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. Compare the original drawing of the house with photos of the same section of the house today. I see contributing I feel contributing is too generously a distinction for this property. What jumps out to me are the drastic changes to the distinguished facade. Not only has the off-center screen front porch been erased as a significantly defining feature of the framed vernacular house, but now it has become absorbed into the house as an enclosed interior space. The screen porch features have long lost along with the nostalgic atmosphere provided by the 10 tall screen panels which once defined the purpose of the original porch on all three sides. The half-screen door is also a major loss to this form of architecture. Cutting into two walls of the enclosed porch for two additional windows was never intended, and it destroys all the pre-air-conditioned Florida imagery as a common feature. The old porch door has been discarded, and a new off-center opening with an inappropriate solid door, which is out of the line with the peak of the gable, has now been added. Above the new entry door is an inappropriate arts and crafts style entrance overhung with wooden brackets supporting a tin roof. None of these elements is part of the original design. They are all very misleading as well as destructive to the value of the facade as a representation of a contributing structure. In my opinion, there are many other fatal changes which make this structure non-contributing. The horizontal decorative boards at the top of the lesser gable of the old front porch have been replaced. New, more elaborate vertical boards with fish scale endings now match those belonging to the major gable to the left and behind the porch gable. This destroyed the needed contrast between the simple porch and the main house. The fish scale tip detailed borders now appear under various other gables and tart up both the old house and the new additions with false decorative details that do not support the singularity of the old house. The granting of contributing structure should not tolerate dishonesty in the overwhelmingly important aspect of the structure under consideration. It always comes back to the facade. Such modifications introduce a false narrative to this applicant's property and are discouraged by the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. For further examples of inappropriate major alterations, look at the two new sets of double windows in the photo, one to the east of the porch door and the other slightly smaller on the west side of the porch. Again, this is a muddled, further marring the originality of the facade. Both double windows are inset into the enclosed walls of the old porch, but at different levels. The new window pairs have nothing to do with the frame vernacular architecture and are not appropriate for a porch. They do support the category of non-contributing structure. There are many other alterations that are harder to see now, but research shows more appropriate materials were originally part of the design of the house but have now been lost. The roof of the house was appropriately of cedar shingles, now replaced with standing seam tin to match the new additions. The extra siding.
Could we do this, wrap this up in about another minute or two?
I have one paragraph and I'll get it done. Okay. The exterior siding was originally cypress wood applied horizontally, but when the new additions were added, the old wood boards did not match up with the new and appear to have a different dimension. The modern replacement boards were consequently used over both old and new constructions alike, thus hampering the distinction. There are many other problems associated with the structure that do not support the contributing classification. Combined with the other code compliance problems and the fact that the old structure is significantly masked from the view by multiple additions and alterations that dilute its significance, I hope that the board will thoroughly consider this application and approve a certificate of demolition. This applicant should be treated in the manner consistent with the outcome of the previous applicants who requested and did receive approval for demolition from this board.
Thank you.
Dr. Kleiner, can you just state your name in the beginning?
David Kiner, and I am a neighbor down the block at 416 Palm Avenue.
Can I ask Mr. Kiner a question? Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Kiner, in your professional opinion, as a former chair of this board, you stated a lot that has changed from the original building. How much do you think is actually still there from the original, like as far as not just square footage but just features?
I can only speak to the facade because the other parts are so hidden.
Yep.
And mostly the sides, and of course the back is completely gone, but mostly the sides have nothing of any interest. The facade really tells the story, but I would say it's missing the vast majority of its detailing, and plenty of the detailing is now false. By that I mean the decorative boards that are built into the gables don't have anything to do with the actual drawing that was done in 1940. They changed positions to go horizontal instead of vertical. Then where they were horizontal, they've been tarted up with new, more decorative ones. So to me, those are all false aspects of the facade.
Thank you. Anyone else have any? Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Please.
Hi, my name is Ellen Kendrick. I'm a resident of Sailboat Bend. I walk by this home all the time, and that's where I saw the sign and realized it was being, that there was an application for demolition. I was completely unaware of the history of the house and how many modifications are made, and et cetera. So I'm not even going to speak to this particular house, but what I would like to say is I hope that we keep the Sailboat Bend historic. I would like to see something historic preserved in the city. There's just getting to be less and less all the time. It does give the neighborhood a unique character and charm. I also love the neighborhood. And I'm concerned about the fact that not only are the older homes being demolished, but that some of the newer homes that are being built are extremely modern and don't fit the character of the neighborhood. And I hope that the guidelines for what can be built are maintained. I hope that the board will be careful about what is allowed to be demolished and what is allowed to be built so that we can maintain some semblance of history in the city and some of the, if you want to call it, old Florida. And I think we're the only historic district, at least that I know of. I just want to say that I hope that we can keep just this one district and keep it truly historic. Thank you.
Chair Marcus stepped away for a moment, so I'll just ask if there's anyone else from the public that'd like to speak on the matter.
I'd like to speak, but I'd like to wait.
He's on his way. You can beat him there.
Hi, I'm Maggie Hunt, and I live in Sailboat Bend. Okay. So this house, I would argue, is historic. It's a contributing property, and Tricia Logan, who has a MS in historic preservation, has, did the architectural survey that put the house in that way. It was built in 1940. I have the building permit here. It was also the Patricia Morillo, who was the Planner 3 in January 2009, did a historic resource survey, and she chose it as one of 8 houses to put in this survey and put a picture in it. So she would concur with Tricia. And I have it there if anybody wants to see that 2009 survey.
Perhaps you can just pass it to the board and we could just take a quick look.
Permit or the survey?
Just the survey, I think.
Okay.
It'd be easier to look at.
You have to scroll down. This is the
Okay.
Not with a computer. Okay. Whatever you show them becomes public record, so
Right.
we can't take your computer.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, can I show, like, since I don't have a slide thing, can I show where it is and scroll down and show them?
So IC, can you accommodate what she's requesting or no?
Can I just stand
Well,
right here?
we want to
they're
find out if
they're
IT can
behind
put
you.
it on the screen for you.
So in other words, we would probably want you to email a copy to staff so that we have it, whatever that is.
I can't believe you don't have it. It's a city document.
No, what I'm saying is that whatever you're producing becomes a record for this case.
Oh, so I'll email it to
So
you.
it's not, we
Okay.
can't give a new record for this case.
Okay,
Yeah.
and this is a building permit. If you guys
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, so I walk by this house. I walk all the time, and I've always thought it was an adorable house. And to tell you the truth, when they enclose the screen-in porch, I probably wouldn't have noticed. And if you look, the picture's gone. If you looked on the left side of the house, it's a cross gable, and you can't see the other gable sticking out. But all the vertical and roof lines are still there. And I would imagine that part of the reason for doing things to your historic house according to the guidelines is so that they can easily be removed. And returning that front area to a screen porch, I'm sure would be easier than taking the addition down on the back. And the front protective covering, that would be easy to take off also. And before you're done, I would appreciate it before you decide that it shouldn't be there because it's not up to code. Historic houses are treated differently when it comes to that. This house has been there since 1940, and for those of you who have lived here for a long time, that's a lot of hurricanes. There's that. Also, the other thing, we have people come to our civic association and to our pre-agenda meetings, and they're upset because why are these houses being demolished? But yet they must not be comfortable coming here because they don't end up here. And I'm okay. I don't like doing, it's hard when it's somebody in your neighborhood. It's hard to come in and say, I disagree with it, because they have their plans. It does not meet any requirements for a certificate of demolition, as the staff report says. There is no addition on the front because there's no perimeter change vertically or horizontally. There was simply an enclosure made. Okay, we also know the history of the house. You know, if we end up approving this for demolition, I'm just going to give you a 20-second history.
Could you also maybe wrap it up?
Yeah, I will. So the gentleman who owned this, you can see on the permit, is Christopher Lassen. He started a business with one small steamboat on Cedar Lake, Indiana, to take tourists around the lake in 1896. He added 7 more boats. He built a dance hall later, which claimed to be Indiana's largest on-the-water dance pavilion. It was actually out on the water, and a pier went to it. The popular dance hall drew large crowds and was later expanded to include a buffet and a saloon. In 1914, a kitchen and dining room were added, and then they made a hotel there. People came from Chicago and ended up all over the nation coming here on the railroad. And he made enough money that he could buy this second house, which he eventually retired to. Now, I'll tell you real quick. I'm almost done.
It's just that we have a very long agenda.
So this is him by his boat in the backyard. And this is a seaplane that he took to Cuba often. And the other pictures of his dance hall.
That's it. You don't have to pass them around. That's okay. Just something that.
If she wants to give it to you, you can.
Oh, you can take it.
But
Well,
remember,
it's part of the history of the house.
right?
it's
But
not
it
gonna-
becomes a public record, so you'll lose it. So just so you know, you can pass it to them if you
Okay,
want.
and so, I mean, that's part of the history of the house. And okay, so as far as flooding goes, you know, I own a house that floods off the Mississippi. And, you know, I have to sandbag. I've probably done it 7 times with my husband. And people down farther that have flooding all around have raised the level of their houses a couple of feet. And sometimes that enables you to have a little crawl space to store things. So I feel like the denial of the certificate does not deprive the property owner of all reasonable beneficial use of his property. And we all have to make hard choices. The house I live in Sailboat Bend is really not big enough for me. I love my neighbors. I've never had such good neighbors or been as close to my neighbors. But you eventually have to make that decision, whether you want to keep fighting the flood or whether your house is big enough. We don't all.
Could you wrap it up like in 30 seconds,
yeah,
please?
we all unfortunately, you know, don't get to live in the places like we want to live all the time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Please. I just wanted everybody to know I'm trying to give everyone who speaks 2 or 3 minutes because we have a very long agenda tonight.
Good evening. Michaela Conca, Broward Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm here this evening to support the HPB of Fort Lauderdale to maintain this existing structure at 930 Tequesta Street. I'd like to see them make a motion to approve conditions for the house, also known as the site address of 930 Southwest 4th Street. The legal description is Waverly Place, 2-19, D Lot 8 Block 100 property, and I'm not going to go through the ID number. The Sailboat Bend Historic District has approximately 170 contributing structures left. I heard someone tonight say they don't want to see them continue to be demolished. With the continued loss of the Sailboat Bend Historic District's the district structures, the fabric of this district will begin to fray and gradually unravel. This is going to minimize the city's original plans for this district. As HPB members review situations regarding the contributing structure that are part of Fort Lauderdale's historic district, it is your position to make your motion based on the City of Fort Lauderdale's ULDR Section 47-24.11 D3 criteria. As I reviewed the city staff report, it is clear this historic house contributes to the Sailboat Bend Historic District. Staff report states complete demolition would remove this contributing structure from the Sailboat Bend Historic District. Denial of a certificate of appropriateness would not deprive the property owner from all reasonable beneficial use of this property. And that's a statement that comes down directly from the interior of
Department of Interior.
the Department of the Interior. Thank you. The conclusion, Tricia Logan stated in her staff report, as a contributing property that is intended to support historic preservation, demolition is not considered a major benefit to this historic district. It is also important to note that this property is located in an archaeological sensitive zone. And a cultural resource assessment survey by a qualified professional is going to be required. I'm requesting that the HPB makes a motion to deny, or in the very least, approve with conditions. I am requesting those conditions would be to maintain the contributing historic structure with demolition only to the surrounding addition. The addition that is non-contributing. And also, I'd like to make one final personal comment about the fact that most historic structures today, when they are maintained, the original historic structure, in the architectural world, they use something called adaptive reuse. What adaptive reuse is when the existing historic structure is maintained and then the architect works within the guidelines of that historic structure to support it and bring around an existing newer product, home, building, call it what you will. So there isn't any reason in the world why this original, and as Maggie pointed out, there isn't any reason in the world why this original contributing structure cannot be maintained, and that a good, competent architect can't come in with some wonderful, creative, adaptive reuse designs. And I also would like to comment and agree with Maggie. This building has been around since 1940. It's been through a lot of hurricanes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? If not, we'll open it up to the board.
Did you want to hear from staff?
Oh, we would like to hear from
staff.
I'm sorry, yes.
Before we get there, could I just, Richard, could you just clarify the reason for you abstaining? Because I know you did so in the previous meetings, but you just have to state the reason on the record. You're staying here? No? Okay, good.
Richard, you can go right to the mic.
Yeah.
Because of an abutting property.
So you're abstaining under Chapter 286, prejudice or bias.
I have submitted my form already, so
Thank
that's
you.
stated in there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Tricia?
Yes. Good evening, board. Tricia Logan, Principal Urban Planner. As you've heard, this is a certificate of appropriateness request for demolition of the entire structure on this site. It is a contributing structure to the Sailboat Bend Historic District per the most recent architectural resource survey of the district that was approved in 2021. There have been some minor modifications to the structure over time, including an addition to the rear, the construction of the carport, and the enclosure of the screened-in porch on the front. We do not have a record of when the screened-in porch was enclosed. That sometimes indicates that it may have been done early on in the history of the structure. Sometimes we've seen that they're done within a few years of construction. So it becomes part of the history of the structure. Staff evaluated this property as part of the survey and did find overall within the original portion of the building that it does retain a high level of architectural integrity. With the evaluation of the criteria within the code, staff did find that the application did not meet any of the criterion listed, and that's outlined in the staff report. And then just in conclusion, staff finds that the application for the COA for demolition under case number UDP-HP23020, located at 930 Tequesta Street, does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 47-2411 D3CI of the ULDR, and does not meet the criteria as outlined in sections 47-2411 D4 of the ULDR. The board must make a motion for approval with conditions, or a motion for denial. If the board adopts a motion for approval with conditions, the following conditions in the staff report are outlined for consideration. 1, the demolition of the structure shall not negatively impact properties within the historic district, and protection from construction debris and construction equipment shall be provided as necessary. 2, this property is located in an archaeologically significant zone, and a cultural resource assessment survey by a qualified professional is required. The completed survey must be submitted and reviewed by preservation staff prior to the building permit application for demolition. Following the review of the completed survey, additional archaeological testing or monitoring comments may apply. And 3, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including landscaping. And I just wanted to mention the new construction project that was projected on the screen has not been evaluated by staff. So we haven't evaluated that for it meeting any criteria as far as new construction is concerned.
Thank you. With that, we'll open it up to board comments. I just wanted to say one thing before we start. As an architect, I wanted to acknowledge Michaela from Broward Trust because she stole my thunder. One of the things I've always believed in is that old buildings can be adaptively reused into even new uses, or let alone the same use, but a different kind of use. So I think it's a misnomer to state that that can happen. And also it's a misnomer to state that that a house built in 1940 would adhere to 2023 zoning codes and building codes. None of these buildings adhere to that. In other jurisdictions, what's typically done is if it was decided that this was indeed a screen porch, the structure's still there, could easily be taken down, remade into a screen porch. All I'm saying is that whatever has been changed, the house is still standing, and it's easy enough to unchange it, at least the section, and upgrade it while a new house is being built around it. And as Michaela said, if a qualified architect knows what he's doing, he can certainly put the two together. I just wanted to mention that. And with that, I'll open it up to board discussion.
I just got to say, I think it's a little bit hypocritical on one side to say, well, we can turn it back into a screen porch, but it's already been changed. And so,
well,
I just don't see.
If it's original and the owner wanted to restore the house, they could take off the siding and restore it into a screen porch if the drawings are sufficient to show what it originally looked like. If the drawings are insufficient, then you have nothing to go on. But
Just
anyway.
my 2 cents on that, on the screened-in porch. I think that, in my opinion, is a big factor that it looks completely different if it's not a screened-in porch, with the addition of the new window to the left of the door if you're facing it from the street view, and then enclosure of the screen, plus the addition of the carport. In my opinion, it just looks totally different.
So do you have any comments about the totality of the project?
Yeah, so I did review all the documents here, and I thought what was most of note to me was the engineering report. And I heard comments that, of course, it's not up to current code because it's a historically old structure. And while I get that, I don't think that necessarily gets to the point of a building code and that safety of the inhabitants, which I think if my family was living there, I would want to be up to code. And then also the flood FEMA report. I think we all saw what happened here not too long ago with the historic flooding. I live around the corner, and I would, if I lived in this property, being on the water, also appreciate wanting to raise the level of the house. So I am in favor of this certificate.
Thank you. We'll go right down the line. It's easier.
Hi, yeah, sure. I concur with my fellow board member that the house has been changed significantly, that it is no longer contributing. The windows aren't the same level. It's a pretty house, but it's on the water. I see it as a liability for a homeowner living there.
Thank you. I am having trouble, I think that we create historic districts for the preservation of history, and we've had a lot of different houses come before us over time. And some have been approved, some haven't, some we've worked with owners to try to figure out, is there a middle ground so that we can continue to try to keep and preserve the historic nature of the district. I am struggling with this particular property. I found the gentleman, the former chair's testimony to be rather compelling. I'm struggling because it just seems like, even the visual, I'm thinking of the visual in the packet of 80% of this house is new. And even the front, we often talk a lot about the front facade, and a lot of the front facade has been changed significantly. Which I think does matter. Sometimes we get these properties and they are really true to their nature. They have historic architects, and there's a historic piece that goes with this. And I am really struggling with this particular piece for that. I also, at the same time, we've talked a lot about the impact of flooding, and to Shane's point, I think we have to balance historic preservation and the need for people to live in safe structures that actually are lowering their risk to flooding. I mean, we've seen it here considerably, and I think that to see the pictures in the report of a structure that is like literally I would not want to be in that house during a hurricane. The foundation does not look to be able to support the amount of winds that comes in our area, and so I do have concerns with this property, and the need balancing. I'm trying to balance the need of the homeowner to be able to have a safe structure that they can live in, that while also doing preserving our history. And I think that this is one of those cases where I'm finding myself disagreeing with the staff report.
Thank you. Alan?
Tricia, when you were putting this together, did you have a chance to talk to the applicant's representative?
No, they did not reach out to set up a meeting.
Okay. I'm always struck by these discussions, especially when there are cited precedents. However, I yield a lot of my thought to the staff's expertise, the number of existing houses that remain in this district, and I really find your discussion, Arthur, on adaptive reuse can address the issues that have been raised by my fellow board members. So as I mull it over, we're here on the Historic Preservation Board for a reason, and I'd like to find a way to keep the property.
To keep the property, how? I mean, to
As
retain
is.
it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can't make everybody happy, that's for sure. I see Greg Bruton out there. He knows this story. Rocking a hard spot here. We have a young family who's got a future ahead of them, and they want a house that they can live in. They want a house that they can grow in, and their children can be raised in. And for that, it has to be safe. So some of the considerations that are on the table here are extremely affected by safety issues. The house may have put up with a lot of hurricanes since 1940, but every fighter eventually loses the fight. That's a lot of hurricanes. How many does it have left in it? I don't know. I lean in the direction heavily of allowing this house to be replaced with a safer, newer home. My question is, with the architectural approach that you had, Arthur, when you said it can be, I'm sorry,
Adaptive reuse.
Adaptive reuse. Again, and I always come back to money. How much does something like that cost rather than do what they're proposing? That must be extremely expensive. We had that happen once before. I believe you had, I can't remember which one it was, but it was just impossible for them to adaptively reuse the property because it was just impossible. The new additions that they were suggesting were just going to make everything else fall apart. So I'm not arguing that it has to go this way, but I can tell you that I am going to vote in favor of its demolition, and I respect everyone who's not in favor of it, and I see what they're saying, but I'm looking at long term. I'm also looking at a family that's, in my conversation, said that they were going to stay there. So what happens to this property? The neighbor over here said he's seen it change hands several times, and he has a good feeling about this, and he'd like to see the neighborhood grow with this family, and I think that's important. That's some considerations we have to put on.
What are your feelings about the historic nature of the property, since that's why we're here?
It's questionable. We have our
Right.
former chair explain his position on it, and you explained your position on it. These young ladies explained theirs. I'm digesting it all, and I'm not heavily on the side of its historic nature either.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm saying it's a close race.
Good.
But I have to
Okay.
make a choice. So I'm being very honest and open about where I'm going to vote on this.
Thank you. Richard?
I think the board shared very open, honest opinions on this. I'll be brief with my comments on it. It's a hard application. There's no doubt. There's an easy direction to tilt in either direction. Trish, I had one question for you. You wrote up a great staff report as usual. In terms of the history of the house, and one of the members of the public cited something, but typically we'll go and we'll name an architect. Was there anyone named here in the design of it of significance at any point in the original design?
No, and a lot of the early houses in Sailboat Bend didn't necessarily have architects associated with them. They were just builders within the area. They're vernacular homes that were built with traditional materials that were found in the area by local builders.
Right. And was there anyone locally important or significant that had lived in the home for any significant period of time that's known?
I mean, other than what Maggie Hunt mentioned, not that I'm aware of, but it doesn't necessarily require that to be a contributing structure within a historic district.
Sure. No, and I only raise the points because usually when we do have a substantive or important figure or architect, it's named in the report. And I noticed in this one it wasn't named. And where I'm getting a little more towards the direction of leaning into the demolition, really two reasons. There seems to have been a major alteration or reconfiguration to the facade on the front elevation, and that's a lot of times where I focus a lot of the weight of my viewpoint, because that's what you see from the street. That's what you see as the neighbor walking by. And when that's lost its initial and original design, that's where I like to rely on some of the reason why, although not in the application what we'd want to see, and in this case it's really been denied, I think, on every item. That's one area where I feel we can make a discretionary call. The second being the obvious, which is the reality and the practicality of maintaining a home at a 4-foot elevation, that it is inevitably going to encounter some trouble, whether that's trouble that takes it out once and for all or insurability issues. I'm getting insurance renewals on houses that aren't at this flood elevation that are astronomical. I cannot imagine what is going to happen to carry flood insurance or to carry insurance on this house. It's going to be absolutely unreasonable is not the word. It's going to be impossible to justify it. So I'm trying to weigh the practicality with what we have, which has been deemed a contributing structure, and I'm leaning in the direction of seeing why that major change on the front elevation is enough to lean in the direction of voting for it. But I really appreciate everyone's comments. One of the best discussions we've had in a long time.
Thank you. I'm just going to say I have a few comments. I wanted to reiterate that the Federal Historic Structures Guidelines, I can't remember the exact name of it, does say that if alterations have been made to a historic building and those alterations can be undone and the historic building can be brought back to its original state, that is something that should be done. So the fact that windows have been moved, there's a gable that over the door that's not historic, those things are immaterial. They can be changed. The same thing as the structures there, as I said earlier, from the screen porch. So I think some consideration needs to be made for that. As Broward Trust said earlier, Michaela, that this was one of the 10 homes originally featured for the district. I do believe that even though it's altered, that the size and the character of the house does contribute to the district, as it has been said. When I was talking about adaptive reuse, I was only talking about the front small portion, which as an architect, if I'm looking at this, I always design something as I look at it, could easily be made into a foyer and then a new house added in the back that's respectful of the existing architecture, but yet can take off on its own direction. So I would like to see some consideration in the new house that perhaps this small portion of the existing home could be retained with a new house built in back or even around it, because there's still plenty of room on the lot. So I think, I don't know, it's a tough decision, as everybody said, but I do think there are possibilities here. And I don't think anything like this would stop you from really developing the property. No, we can't have any comments after board discussion. Thank you. So with that, we'll call a vote.
Could
Please.
I just make a suggestion? So in page 3 of your staff report, it has the criteria for you. So when whoever makes the motion in accordance with 166.033 Florida statute, please just state what criteria you believe it does or doesn't meet and the factual basis for that in accordance with the criteria that's before you, not other things. And just to clarify for the record, 472411B defines adaptive reuse, and it means any act or process that converts a structure to a use other than that for which it was designed. Example, changing a bank into a restaurant. Such may be accomplished with a varying degree of alteration to a structure, or may vary from extensive remodeling to a slight alteration or change in use. So just to make sure that the understanding is in accordance with the code. So just a reminder. Thanks.
Thank you. Would you like to call the board members? Recording?
I don't think we have a motion on the table.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. We don't have a motion.
I'll make
But
a
I'll
motion.
go ahead.
Motion to approve this this application for certificate of appropriateness of demolition, and I believe that the property is no longer has significance as historical architectural significance.
You have to relate it to the criteria on page 3.
So the criteria, I believe that you're probably going to, correct me if I'm wrong, is on page 3 of your staff report. You probably want to go to 472411D4 and then look at that. And
Yes,
then,
Romanet 2 under that.
Okay, so you're saying it no longer it meets that criteria, correct?
Correct.
And then what about the other criteria above that, 472411D3CI?
So yeah, under the 472411D 3C Romanet 1, I would say that it the denial of the appropriateness would deprive the property owner of reasonable beneficial use of the property, given the stated reasons before.
This criteria in 472411D3CI, those are all and. The other one below it are or. So you want to make sure it's clear, not necessarily stating the reasons before. You have to state it in your motion what your reason is. So is it based on the testimony you heard tonight from the audience? Okay. Thank you. And all the documentation that you saw, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a second to the motion?
I just want to be clear on what the motion is. Can you repeat back the motion?
So
Shari?
my understanding of the motion is that you're saying that it meets all of the criteria on page 3 in the staff report. Well, you're not saying that it meets 472411D4I. You're saying that it meets II. You're not saying that it meets III in that. Is that correct? Or you're saying that it meets everything? Just making sure.
Yes, Romanet 2.
Okay. So, and then the chart above that mentions 472411D3CI, you're stating that it meets all of the criteria in that?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And it's based on the testimony you heard and documentation you reviewed as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And is that with conditions or without conditions?
Without conditions.
Are you sure? Did you look at the conditions on the last page? So the conditions are on the last page of the staff report. It's, let's see, it's right below where it says.
Yeah, I see them. I have a question, I guess. The archaeological survey, is that required by the city code?
Yes.
Then yes, with that condition.
Yes.
Yes, with the condition of the survey that's required under the code.
Any other conditions?
No.
Well,
we have
building
you
and
have to
zoning
include
is
the
pretty
other one.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so all, yes, all 3 conditions.
Great.
And just, can I ask one clarifying question of Tricia? For the first condition on that it will not negatively impact properties within the historic district, that just means neighboring properties, correct? Because
Correct.
obviously if you're demoing a property, it's going to tear down the property. I just want to make sure it doesn't directly mean this property.
Right.
Okay.
Surrounding properties.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. So can we have a roll call?
Mr. Jones?
No.
Ms. Mosty? Yes. Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mr. Chavon?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
And Chair Marcus?
No.
Motion passed 5-2.
Congratulations. Good luck. The next item on the agenda is case number UDP HP 23035 1116 Broward Boulevard. First of all, do we have any disclosures from anyone on the board?
No.
No. Okay.
I go by it all the time.
Okay.
Yes, I also pass by it all the time.
In that case, Tricia, do you want to read the staff report?
Sure. This is a certificate of appropriateness application for major alteration to include the installation of 3 new signs, 2 illuminated wall signs, and 1 illuminated double-face panel for an existing freestanding sign. The wall sign that's on the north elevation is a front-lit channel letter sign with a logo that is spread across the 58-foot frontage of the building, and the total square footage of this sign is 79 square feet. The wall sign that's on the west elevation is a front-lit channel letter sign that's approximately 21 feet in length with a total area of 42 square feet. And the freestanding sign is just the replacement of the plastic face on the existing freestanding sign structure. The sign is overall 12 feet in height, and the sign facing is 13.5 square feet on each side for a total of 27 square feet. The property is permitted to have 1 wall sign per street frontage and 1 freestanding sign, so it meets our regulations for that. The the replacement of the facing on the freestanding sign is considered a replacement in kind and would meet our regulations for that. The sign that's on the west side of the elevation is compatible in size with the surrounding area and other signs that are found. However, the sign that's facing Broward Boulevard is relatively large in comparison to other signs in the area, and our design guidelines do state that a sign should be compatible with the overall scale of the building.
So could you explain that a little further? Why would this sign not be considered compatible?
It's the scale of the
size of the
overall
lettering?
size of the sign that's on the north elevation on Broward Boulevard.
So if the total area of the proposed sign is 79 square feet,
Mhm.
what is allowed?
It's with our code, it does allow much more. It's a very permissive code, but for historic preservation and our historic preservation design guidelines, we do have other criteria to take a look at and review as part of any application. Part of our sign regulations within the design guidelines do talk about the overall scale of a sign and placement on the facade and how it compares to the overall scale of that particular
Okay.
facade. So in looking at that, a more appropriate scale would be smaller
Okay.
to be compatible with the overall size of this particular structure.
And just talk for a moment about the type of lighting that is proposed and the type of lighting that is permitted.
Yeah, so within our design guidelines, it does talk about having an external light source, and usually that's just like a gooseneck lighting or some lighting source that's placed on the ground to illuminate the facade and the overall lighting. These signs are channel letter signs that are internally lit, and even though it's not something that's highlighted within our design guidelines, something that has been approved in the past as a halo lighting for these channel letters. So it's a backlighting that provides more of a soft glow to the overall letters rather than the front-facing illumination.
So you're looking for backlit channel letters.
Right.
Okay.
Backlit or halo lit.
Okay.
Described in both ways.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Trisha, one question.
Yeah.
Is there like a difference in the lumens that would come off of a lighting in which you're proposing versus something that what the application already has? Like in terms of frontage when you drive by, are you going to see it the same way?
As far as like
Does
the
it light up
amount
the
of
sa-
light that
Yeah,
is.
does it light up the same way?
I think that the halo lighting or backlighting is softer.
Much
It's
softer.
not as bright,
Okay.
but we don't have, didn't have to submit a lighting calculation for this
Okay.
particular application.
Would there be, in your opinion, any other way, and I'm getting a little off topic with it admittedly, but like, would anyone come forth with this option that you're suggesting we revert to per the report if given the choice between what's been proposed in the application and what you're mentioning, given Broward Boulevard has 55,000 cars a day going by it, it's a pretty busy thoroughfare, so.
Well, in this particular case, the applicant has requested the front lit channel letters.
Right.
So that is their preference.
Okay.
And the code doesn't say anything about a preference? Just checking.
Discourages.
So their sign code has one particular description. It has different allowances within it. It doesn't necessarily address the lighting. Our design guidelines for historic preservation is what is addressing the lighting, the scale,
okay.
the materials, and things like that.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we're looking at specifically historic preservation regulations for properties that are within a historic district or any historic landmark.
Great.
Would be evaluated in the same way.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Applicant, would you like to address
Would you like
us?
for me to read my conclusion
Oh, I'm
into
sorry.
the record?
I thought you were done.
In accordance with sections 472411D3CI and 472411D3CII of the ULDR, staff finds that the application for a COA for major alterations under case number UDP-HP 23035 located at 1116 West Broward Boulevard does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CI of the ULDR and does not meet the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CII of the ULDR, the board must make a motion for approval, with conditions, or a motion for denial. If, however, the HPB adopts a motion for approval with conditions, the following condition for the COA for major alteration is provided for consideration by the HPB, that this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including landscaping.
Thank you. Applicant, please introduce yourself.
Yes, good evening. Ryan Abrams. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicant. This is a relatively simple application. I think the main dispute, which I learned about just a few days before this hearing, is over the lighting and over the sign size at the north elevation, which I understand. The key thing to point out is, first of all, this structure was vacant for a while. This is a structure that is previously was used as a nightclub, but hasn't been updated in years. Now it's being updated, and it's being actually adaptively reused. That is what is happening here. The signage is not out of character for this area. That's another thing to consider. There's many other signs in the area that are comparable in size and in lighting. There's backlit signs all up and down this corridor. I'll go over a little bit of that in my brief presentation, if I can get this to work. There you go. So that's the general location of the property. This is where the site is.
Wait, go back one.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No
Just
problem.
the site. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, this is the site. This is some pictures of the site as it was, and it's already been repainted. This is doesn't really capture what it's going to be. The proposed use is going to be retail. It's going to be for the selling of golf cars. It's become an increasingly popular use. And
So you're adaptively reusing this building.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. This is a case in point on how adaptive reuse works and how it can be put into effect. 3 signs being proposed. 2 signs are front channel signs on the west and north elevation. Third is an illuminated pylon sign replacing the existing sign. That's another important point. That existing standalone external sign was already there. It's just being replaced. The sign is being replaced with the golf cars. This is the north elevation. I think it's kind of a judgment call, and you'll see the design criteria puts that determination in the place of this board. There's a preference expressed in the design guidelines for scale and for the type of lighting. It's just a preference. So ultimately, it's up to this board to decide what is in character, what makes sense for this area. And I would also ask if there are any specific objections that be noted so that it can be addressed, perhaps an approval with conditions, if there were any concerns. This is on the west side. This is a copy of a relevant portion of the design criteria. It says that for historic preservation, it says every effort will be made to assist commercial building owners and tenants with revitalizing older retail areas and buildings. That's what we are looking to achieve here, and to encourage compatibility and provide visual connection with historic building and context. Encourage consideration of how a proposed storefront and sign or awning relates to each property, the streetscape, and the historic context. Oh, wrong button. Okay. As to signs, it says signage should be compatible with the scale of the building, adjacent building, streetscape. While larger scaled signs may be appropriate to vehicular traffic, it does say that. Larger scaled signs may be appropriate to vehicular traffic. This is next to Broward Boulevard, a major corridor. So a larger sign facing the north elevation, on the north elevation facing Broward Boulevard makes sense here. It also says regarding illumination, it says it expresses a preference for certain types of illumination. It says backlit signs are typically inappropriate. It doesn't say always inappropriate, typically inappropriate. Again, it's a judgment call for this board. These are some of the other properties on this corridor that have similar signage, and some are quite bright. Dunkin' Donuts has a large sign facing Broward Boulevard. backlit sign. The South Florida Jeeps has a very large backlit sign. There's a Chinese restaurant, which I'm not even sure is open anymore. Maybe it is. And then there's a Walgreens with a rather large sign as well. So this is not uncommon for this commercial corridor. And so we think it does meet with the standards in the code. And if there's any balancing question here, it's a judgment call. And I think voting in favor of this is voting in favor of encouragement of revitalization. So that's all. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any questions? If there may be, we will know you in the audience. With that, let's start from this end. Alan, do you have any?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Tim?
No, I think it's a done deal. I think I would approve it. I don't see any problem with it. Fits the neighborhood, and it's not any structural change, so sounds good to me.
I appreciate the applicant calling the difference between its location specifically within the historic district. I certainly see this as something different than would be an OB house, where you don't have the same thoroughfare, you don't have the same amount of cars, nor no one traveling by your business at the same rate of speed they're going to travel by on Broward Boulevard. One more thing to add: I think it's been maybe 4 years at least, maybe even 5, since anyone took a shot at this building. So I think we should use every measure to encourage their success and long-term viability.
Thank you. Shane?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Rosa. I think that it is nice to see someone putting a financial effort behind this building, which frankly looked terrible before this paint job. So I would be in favor of this.
Yeah, I certainly want to reward economic development in this area, and the building is facing a major corridor. It's not smack dab in the middle of the historic district, so I would be in favor of this.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, I was surprised. I guess I didn't realize that businesses on Broward Boulevard were a part of the historic district, so that was a little surprising for me when I saw this on the agenda. I do think that along that corridor, it is it is different than being in the middle of a neighborhood, or even being on a busier road within, a more commercialized interior, a commercialized road that's on the interior. So I do think there is a distinct difference, and it does seem consistent with the other businesses in the area. The examples of the signs that Ryan showed were, I think, compelling as well. So I'm generally in favor of this as well.
The signage is generally not to my preference, but it's acceptable, especially since the City of Fort Lauderdale Police Station is less than a block away, and the applicant's proposed signage fits the character of the neighborhood far more than the new police station design, which was approved. And the Chen Gardens that you pointed out, Walgreens, Dunkin' Donuts, all of those have large signs on their front. And as we pointed out, it's kind of appropriate for the neighborhood because it is a primary throughway, but there has to be more flexibility with the businesses to operate profitably, since the most important incentive for property owners is through income-producing properties like this. So I generally agree that this has to be more flexibility, and would be okay with me.
Thank you. We've had many projects come before us that are in the Broward Boulevard portion of the Sailboat Bend Historic District. And I've always said every time these come up that I wish at some point we could separate this portion of the district along Broward into a separate district or out of the district, because it's so entirely different. With that, I'm going to be the outlier today, and I do support the staff report. And in terms of, I do think that the signage is a little too big for the proportions of the building. And since they are building a new police station a block away, I think it's time for the neighborhood to come up to speed a little bit. And I would prefer to see the backlit channel or a halo lettering. So with that, we'll have a roll call.
We need a motion first.
Oh, we need a motion. I'm always ahead of myself. Does anyone have a motion?
Just same reminder to look at the criteria on pages 2 and 3, and also the material and design guidelines in 4717 for Sailboat Bend. And just in your motion to make sure that you're stating that it meets the criteria that I just mentioned. It's also listed on page 1 of the staff report in the first table there, the applicable criteria, and state the factual basis for doing so.
Is 4717 outlined anywhere here? It's just referenced in the applicable table.
Yeah, it's just referenced here in the staff report on page 1. We could possibly you want to pull up the code so they could see it, or I don't, we could pull it up for you, but it's just basically stating what kind of materials they have to use. So.
Yeah, the big distinction here, I mean, the only reason I would want to see it is just to confirm that I'm sure it's accurate, is the buzzword here of discouraged versus anything else, it seems to be.
Could you just give us a few minutes and we'll pull it up to just make sure you make an informed decision? So she's just going to go over there.
Perfect.
So I think it would be 4717.4 and then 4717.7. They're just trying to send it to.
Sure.
Yeah. Tricia, while we're waiting, I have a question. Has there ever been any consideration, as mentioned earlier, of separating these two parts of the Sailboat Bend district? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to.
You're doing
type
two
to
things.
him.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize.
Yeah. What? Could you repeat that?
My question was, since we've talked about this for a number of years, has there ever been made, how would we go about suggesting that this portion of Broward Boulevard be separated from Sailboat Bend, or is that even possible?
So several years ago, there was a proposal that came before the Historic Preservation Board that did propose to remove the Broward Boulevard section from the Sailboat Bend Historic District. But basically, the Historic Preservation Board sent a communication to the City Commission stating that they did not want that proposal to move forward.
Was that all of Broward or just the police station? I remember the police station
It was all
item.
of Broward.
Okay.
And the PUD.
Is that something that if we brought before another Historic Preservation Board could be considered?
Sorry, we don't do politics.
Okay.
But by all means, if you'd like to. You can.
No, I think that would be best left to the neighborhood group.
Yeah, if it was something that the board was interested in exploring, then you can send a communication to the City Commission, and then we would get direction from them.
As just suggested by the Assistant City Attorney, I think we'll stay out of politics. It was just a question, though.
I was going to say I'd be comfortable making a motion relying on 47-16-21 that provides the sign regulation specifically prohibiting certain signs, which this sign does not fall into.
That section is applicable to the H1 district only,
Oh,
not
really?
the Sailboat Bend.
Wow.
They pulled it up, Richard. It's a little tiny, though. I think we need like a really big
Yeah.
glasses for that one. Not even mine
Can we
can do
enlarge
that.
it?
And I would say the material and design guidelines that are within the Sailboat Bend section aren't
good.
terribly applicable to this application. It's more the
Commercial
citywide
signage.
design guidelines.
Okay.
And there's specific sections that speak to commercial properties and how they're treated.
So with that, would somebody like to make a motion? Oh, Richard's working on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to read it.
I
Unfortunately,
understand.
my eyes at this time of day aren't that good.
I know.
I just don't know what I'm citing to within this specific. Was it 4717-2? There it is. Trying to make a distinction from what was cited as not
Okay.
meeting the criteria here.
Yes. So if we're going to 4717.4, it's probably on the screen, much larger for folks at home, but I can just read a little bit. So it says the provisions of section 472411D as they apply to an application for an alteration, which this is a major
Okay.
alteration, or new construction of structures or buildings located in the Sailboat Bend Historic District shall be revised as follows. And it talks about the application for a certificate of appropriateness shall be reviewed by the department if it meets the criteria in 472411D, and the material and design guidelines is provided in 4717.7. So we want to go to 4717.7, and then it lists the material and design guidelines, and it says that for alterations, the material and design guidelines shall be used in identifying existing features of the original structure and encourage the restoration in line with these features, and to encourage inclusion of historic features when compatible with the character of the original structure. And then in subsection, that was A2, and then in subsection 4717.7B, then it lists all these materials with existing building walls, materials and finish, windows and doors, configurations, general roofs and gutters. So what if you're voting for a motion to approve, then you can simply say that it meets the applicable criteria in the material and design guidelines after your review of it. I just didn't want to feed you the facts.
No, it's fine. I thought there was more of a specific citation to it. I do believe it meets that criteria, but also the applicant put forth something in terms of the commercial section within the Sailboat Bend guidelines, and furthermore, the color around it.
He's referencing the citywide design guidelines, which
Sure.
are the pictorial
But-
version.
So there was nothing in what he referenced on his highlight that was applicable to Sailboat Bend? It doesn't qualify?
It applies to Sailboat Bend. Within
Right.
472411, it references the citywide historic preservation design guidelines.
Right.
Which
But wait-
are the picture version of the design guidelines. And that's where it gets into more detail about the commercial properties and signs. The only other place where it goes into great detail about signs is for the H1 Historic District,
Gotcha.
which doesn't apply at
So,
all.
so we're in this no man's land of like, it's not H1, but it's Sailboat Bend.
It's Sailboat Bend, but it also follows our main ordinance for historic preservation. Within that main ordinance, it references these other design guidelines that are citywide applied, including H1, Sailboat Bend, any landmarks. And that's where it goes into a lot of detail about the commercial signs.
Okay. I'll take a
So-
shot at it. If we want to clean it up, we can clean it up. So I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under, make sure I'm on the right one here. I am. Under UDP HP 23035, located at 1116 West Broward Boulevard, based on the application meeting the materials and design guidelines, and subject to the conditions as set forth in the staff report.
And so therefore, the application meets 472411D3CI, 472411D3CII, and 4717, correct?
Correct.
And are you sure it's based on the staff report?
I said as set forth in the staff report, not based on the staff report. It's,
Okay.
it's based on the materials and design guidelines you pulled up on D17?
Okay, so it's based on the testimony you heard that it meets the criteria, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
And would you like the condition in there?
Well, there was one condition, correct?
Yes.
We could throw that in there.
So Richard made the motion and Alan seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is case UDP HP 23036, 333 Southwest 14th Way. Is the applicant here? First of all, I'm just going to hear, are there any disclosures for this case from the board?
No.
No? No?
I've
Okay.
been by the property many times.
Thank you. Applicant, please introduce yourself. Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. You want me to hold on?
We'll wait one moment.
While you're waiting, could I just
please?
Could I just say a couple of things about the last item that I have a little bit of history on this. Actually, I was the director of the department during that time. One of the reasons the Broward Boulevard corridor was included when the original code was created was to allow those properties on Broward to come before the board and require a certificate of appropriateness if the developer at that point wanted to do something to contribute to the overall design of the Sailboat Bend district. And then you would use that criteria that's established in the code at that point to have a review done to see, how you might be able to encourage. It's very difficult because it's a commercial corridor, and we've had several discussions throughout the years as to whether or not it should be included or not. And obviously, if you have a commercial activity, it's very difficult to apply some of the criteria that's established for the Sailboat Bend district for that type of use. So just to give you a little bit of background history. It's not something new. It's been approximately 30 years of discussion of that at least. So,
well, please begin your presentation.
Okay. Again, I'm Greg Bruton representing the property owner. The property is located at 333 Southwest 14th Way, Lot 9 of Block 2. And it's the lot itself is approximately 10,772 square feet in a single-family, low residential zone district. And it has been reviewed as it relates to compliance with the ULDR relating to the Sailboat Bend district as it relates to demolition. I'll just give you a little bit of information about the property itself. It was built in 1989, and it was a Bill Bigney design structure. The old mayor, Mayor Noggle, actually lived in this structure.
I just wanted to add, Bill Bigney was a very noted local architect.
Very noted. I can hear his voice is scratchy. I mean, I dealt with him on many, many occasions. So yes, he was a very well-renowned architect within the area. However, this particular structure itself does not meet the criteria for historic preservation as it relates to the Sailboat Bend district. Just to give you, this first floor itself is basically storage and parking. The second floor is wood sheeting with wood frame roofing. The reports that's been done will show that a portion of the second floor as it exists today does not meet the current building code and would be subject to some possible property damage in the event something of a very serious storm would occur. The staff has given you a report as relates to the demolition, and I'll go over it pretty quickly. And for demolition, the design, the designated landmark site or property within the historic district no longer contributes to the historic district. The subject property is not a landmark or landmark site, does not have a landmark or landmark site designation. The property of the building no longer has significance as a historic architectural, archaeological landmark. The response is the subject property was built in 1989 and is not a historic resident. The demolition or redevelopment project of major benefit to the historic district. Well, we're not before you tonight to talk about what will be built there because we're going to have to come back to you. We understand that when the property owner, if the board gives us the opportunity to demolish this property, we'll be back in front of the board to make sure that what is built there meets all of the criteria that's established in the code as it exists today.
One question, what is your relationship to the property?
I'm the consultant to the property owner.
Okay, thank you.
And there's actually two lots there. One is vacant, one is a vacant lot.
And you're combining both for a new
Yes,
home?
it's going to be combined for development.
Okay. Thank you. If we have any questions, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? If not, we'll close the public discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Did you raise your hand? No. Sorry. I thought. Please. In that case, we'll start with. Trish didn't read her report.
Well, I'd just like to thank Greg Bruton for reading my staff report for me. He mostly covered everything. This property was constructed in 1989, so it is only 34 years old. And per our regulations, for any property to be considered as a potential landmark, it would have to be considered exceptional if it's not 50 years of age or older. There are 3 other properties on the street that were designed by Bill Biggany as well, and all 4 of them were considered non-contributing in the most recent architectural resource survey. The other 3 were identified as potential historic landmarks, but they were from an earlier time. They are over 50 years old. They have more architectural features than the structure that are in place today. So they were identified as potential historic landmarks. However, this one was not, partially because of the age, partially because of the fact that it doesn't have those architectural features that the other properties do exhibit.
Right.
So staff did find that this application did meet the criteria for the demolition certificate of appropriateness, and I'll read the summary conclusion into the record. Staff finds that the application for a COA for demolition under case number UDP-HP 23036, located at 333 Southwest 14th Way, does meet the criteria as outlined in section 47-2411 D3CI of the ULDR, and partially meets the criteria as outlined in section 47-24 D4 of the ULDR. The board must make a motion for approval with conditions, or a motion for denial. If the board adopts a motion for approval with conditions, the following conditions for the COA for demolition are provided for consideration by the HPB. 1, the demolition of the structure shall not negatively impact properties within the historic district, and protection from construction debris and construction equipment shall be provided as necessary. And 2, this property is located in an archaeologically significant zone. However, no archaeological deposits are anticipated within the subject property. However, if the archaeological materials or features are discovered, then work in the vicinity of the discovery shall stop, and the city shall be notified immediately to coordinate the discovery. If unmarked human remains are encountered, then excavation in the vicinity of the find shall halt immediately, and the archaeologists shall alert the city's historic preservation staff to coordinate the discovery and take measures to implement Chapter 87205 of Florida statutes as it pertains to discovery of unmarked human remains. And 3, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, including landscaping. And that's it. That concludes it.
There's a small amendment to the staff report, right?
Yeah, I read it correctly, but in the staff conclusion, the first line it says, does not meet the criteria, however, it does meet the criteria.
A little confusing, but we understand.
Yeah.
With that, we'll take board comments. Perhaps we'll start with Shane at this end.
Sure. I just will say that I appreciate the representative of the applicant explaining the reasoning behind the application here, and I found the staff report very informative, and I agree with the staff report.
Great. Sonia?
Yeah, I'm inclined to approve. I agree with the staff report and the fact that the building was built in, 1989. Therefore, it is not architecturally significant.
No comments right now.
Okay.
No comments.
I'm sorry, Alan?
Yeah, I support the application. A quick question for Tricia. I don't think I've seen this before where you noted that no archaeological deposits are anticipated. We haven't seen that before, have we?
Yeah, so we do review every application that comes before the Historic Preservation Board for the potential for archaeological deposits. And so we utilize information that has been collected over time and then information that's provided in the original archaeological survey to evaluate what the potential is on each property. This particular property is located within the zone. However, because of additional information that we've been provided over time, the consultant reviewed this application and determined that there is a low probability at this time. We have more information now and has recommended that they do not have to do any further study.
I support the application.
I do as well. No further comment.
Of course. And I support the nomination also. One other, I just had a question for Tricia. This was originally, as you mentioned, part of 4 Bill Bigany houses in this location. The last one we heard was they were talking about moving it. Is that still happening?
They haven't applied for it yet.
Okay. But that was more architecturally significant than this one.
Correct. It's from a different time as well.
Yes.
It's about 20 years prior to this one in the construction date. The other 3 on the same street were built around the same time. Right. This one is much later.
Well, I agree that this is not architecturally significant. With that, I think we can do a roll call vote. I'm sorry, a hand vote.
I'll make a motion to approve
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve with conditions the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition under case number UDP HP 23036 located at 333 Southwest 14th Way based on the facts and findings as outlined in the staff memorandum and subject to the following conditions. The demolition structure will not negatively impact properties within the historic district, that the property is located in the archaeological significant zone and therefore will not be subject to the study, but if there are remains found, then the work will stop, and then that the application is subject to the approval of building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Alan seconded it. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Good luck. The next application is UDP HP 23037, 819 Southwest 1st Street. And Tricia, perhaps before we hear the applicant, why don't we have you read your report?
Okay, so
can we do the disclosures?
And disclosures, any disclosures? No?
No.
None.
Been by the property many times.
Thank you.
I recommend that you go down the line so that each person can speak in the mic and say no, because then it gets on the record.
Alan?
No.
No.
Yes. I at one point, we're on 819 Southwest 1st Street, correct?
Yes.
I, at one point, owned the property. I sold it to the applicants. I don't know if that disqualifies me in any way, but that's a disclosure.
It's no, because under the chapter 112, it's about gain or loss based on this application. So would you lose any money or gain any money from this?
No, I would
Okay.
not.
You're good.
The other thing is I think the application in the staff report, just to make one correction to it, still shows the entity that I had ownership with, just to make that one clarification on the record. At SB 819 LLC was the entity in which I owned it under, just to make the clarification.
Where are you?
First page.
Yeah.
But you no longer own this property.
I no longer own
And you
it.
don't own this LLC.
I do own the LLC.
You do own
But the LLC doesn't own the real property.
Okay. You want to check that?
Ally
The
Investments
property-
is the owner.
The property appraiser's office still has you listed as
Hopefully not. We could check that, but in any event,
I'll look it up right now.
yeah, just to make the clarification on the record.
Or maybe it's changed.
Sure what in the world? Okay, make sure you're looking at the deed, because sometimes, no disrespect, but the property appraiser's
Correct.
office is wrong on certain occasions, especially when there's trusts and different things in LLC. So you got to look at the deed.
The deed is correct. I recorded the deed.
Oh no, for them.
Yeah, no,
They
I know.
gotta-
We'll make the correction.
Okay, thank
We'll
you.
make the correction that
Thank
it's
you.
Ally Investments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Tricia, did you? Oh, we did this. I'm sorry. We're
Simone is actually going to,
researching.
no, she's going to give you an overview of the staff report.
Thank you.
All right, so UDP HP 23037, property known as 819 Southwest First Street, is a vacant parcel in Sailboat Bend. They're asking for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction, a two-story, two-family residence. The majority of the buildings in the area are one-story, with the exception of Salvation Army Complex, and a two-story contributing structure at the end of the block at the corner of Southwest 1st and Southwest 8th Avenue, which is a frame vernacular building. The two separate dwellings are mirrored about the center and unified under a singular roof structure. The zoning performed a cursory review of the submittal and related to requirements for the neighborhood design criteria revisions outlined in section 47-1845, that the duplex two-family dwelling in the ULDR, the following comments were made. Number one, the project identified as duplex and two-family dwelling. If it's a duplex, the property line between the units must be shown. Number two, the exact grade definition to be used will be determined at a later time, as the project is not in a special flood hazard zone. Additionally, the following need to be addressed: the screening of the mechanical equipment from the view, locate the pool equipment, which also needs to be screened, and all glass must be clear low E. There's a discrepancy in the plan versus the illustration, which is at the Juliet balconies, that show a wall section where the roof terminates into the wall. That will be.
Which elevation are you referring to?
I'm sorry, the front elevation, not the Juliet balconies. The front elevation under the balconies.
You're talking about the balconies on the second floor?
On the second
And
floor.
they're really Juliet balconies.
The Juliet balconies are in the back.
Okay.
So the front elevation has the porch roof terminating at the balcony railings. In the illustration, it doesn't show the wall section that would have it terminate into, but in the flat elevation, the two-dimensional elevations, you will see that. So that should be worked out at the time of permitting. We outlined that the project does meet the criteria, and staff finds that the application for a COA for new construction under case number UDP HP 23037, located at 819 Southwest 1st Street, meets the criteria as outlined in section 47-24-11D3CI and section 47-24-11D3CIII, and meets the criteria for consideration of materials as listed under 47-17-7B of the ULDR. The board must make a motion for approval, a motion for approval with conditions, or a motion for denial. If, however, the Historic Preservation Board adopts a motion for approval with conditions, the following conditions for the COA for major alterations are provided for consideration by the Historic Preservation Board. Number one, all glass must be clear with an option of low E. Number two, this before-mentioned discrepancy between the illustration and the elevation drawings regarding the wall section below the balcony railings on the front elevation, the design needs to be clarified at the time of permitting. And number three, this application is subject to the approval of building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements, and we will make the adjustment with the ownership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant, please state your name.
Good evening. My name is Antonino Treu.
I am here on behalf of the architect of record, Neil Aronson, and in support of Carlos Varga of Ally Investments. I'll be brief. I think the building wants to be a good neighbor. It's at the end of a dead-end road next to the Salvation Army, which is a pretty substantial, massive building. And the architect has tried to create a cohesive building that does not want to be anything but a sympathetic, if you will, structure that incorporates many of the features and characteristics that you can find in Sailboat Bend. It doesn't want to be anything but a good building, and we hope that you take it under consideration. We appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
May I just request a clarification on the applicant and the ownership? Can you just state the name of who owns this property and spell it so that the clerk can get it? I know, but if you would, please.
The property is owned by Ally, ALLY Investments, LLC.
Thank you. So the staff report is being amended to reflect that the owner and the applicant are the entity that the applicant just mentioned. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question of the applicant? Have you read the conditions in the staff report regarding the glass must be clear with an option of low E and
Yes.
and the changes to the elevation regarding the balcony railings?
Yes, there was a confusion about in this particular area right here. The original renderings that were provided did not show the actual railing, but we had meeting with staff, and they recommended that we change it. So the final drawings showed the railings, but we didn't have time to do to revise the renderings. So that's where the condition.
So you're good with those conditions?
Oh yeah, of course.
Ashley, while you're talking, do you have any other comments?
No comments on my end.
Okay, thank you. With that, are there any other people from the audience? If not, let's start with Alan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
I feel like after Richard, I didn't hear any disclosures of yes or no. I don't think I heard that. So if you could just clarify after Richard.
Let's go. Disclosures?
No, that way. You were going that way and it stopped. You, Arthur, first.
No.
Yeah, thanks.
I've been by the property many times.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
No disclosures.
Okay. With that, we'll start with our board comments.
Thanks for the presentation. Support the application, and I really appreciate Ashley's question.
Ditto.
I think it's a great design. It's really cool to see it come to life. Well done.
I also think it's a really good design that fits very well into the neighborhood, and I'm glad to see that you took some kind of consideration of the features of the neighborhood and were able to incorporate that into your project. So yes, I think it's a good project.
I like the symmetry that you've created with it, but I also think it's a great utilization of the space considering the housing need in the urban settings. So I appreciate that.
I just want to second Arthur's comments about the great work that you guys did on and thoughtfulness in the design.
I'm inclined to approve. Other than that, no comment.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree with the rest of the board here. I think this is a great addition.
Great. With that, I think we can have a vote by hand. If there are no more comments.
We need a motion.
We need a motion. I'm consistent tonight.
I'm going to make a motion, no card.
No what? Why don't you make a real motion?
You want me to make a motion?
Sure.
Anyone can make a motion.
Except me.
That's true. Why don't
reading, I'll second.
I move to approve the resolution for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number UDP HP 23037 located at 819 Southwest 1st Street based on the following findings of fact that we discussed
In the staff report?
in the staff report and subject to the conditions in the staff report.
So just to clarify, it's the 3 conditions at the bottom of page 7 on the staff report, all of those conditions?
All of those conditions.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Good luck with everything. Okay, I believe our last project is UDPHP 23038, 1205 Southwest 4th Street, Tequesta Street. Is the applicant here?
Do you want to do disclosures?
Yes. Disclosures?
None.
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 Been by the property many
None.
times.
No disclosures.
None.
I've also been by the property many times.
Applicant, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jill Adler, and I live at 1205 Tequesta Street. And I'm nervous, so forgive me. I think you guys all have my letter that I wrote. If not, I'm happy to read it.
Read it. Please read it.
Yeah. We don't have it. We received it by email. So.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and allowing me to speak. I bought my home in August 2016. The moment I walked into it, I fell in love. I was told that the house, which was almost 100-year-old, had been modified in that the master bedroom and bath had been added in the 1990s. From the beginning, I planned on enlarging it at a later date. I am now in a position to do so. I was able to obtain pictures of the previous enlargement process. I had been told that the addition was completed without the owner or contractor obtaining a permit. I have also learned that the home is not registered as historical. Upon receipt of the board's materials, I have learned that the actual front of the house has also been altered. I have also recently been informed after my COA application was accepted that I may not be able to complete the planned addition because it's planned to modify the location of the front, not the facade, which will simply be relocated or replicate it exactly as it is now. This is really devastating news. I have already spent $11,000 for engineering and architectural studies and renderings, and $5,000 for furniture that I cannot return. I had no idea that the addition would be a problem. I'd also like to point out that the house cannot be seen from the street. It is nestled in the back of the property. Over the past several weeks, I've spent countless hours researching any and all previous owners who I was able to contact to gather as much history on the home that I possibly could, because I was told even after looking at microfilm there is very little recorded on the home's true history. One of the previous homeowners who I spoke to stated that she had been told that what is now the back of the house was actually the front of the house. This seems like a reasonable possibility as the home once sat on a much larger piece of property. I also find it curious that I have such a large front yard and no backyard. I'm in desperate need to complete the long-planned enlargement. I have saved my money to accomplish it. I am a single woman on disability with limited income and money and cannot afford to lose to $16,000. I have so carefully saved. I implore you to help me resolve this issue by granting me a certificate of appropriateness, or at least with conditions. Sincerely yours, Jill Adler.
Would you like to add anything? Or?
Did you get the pictures of the actual additions and all that? Okay.
Yes. I believe so. Hold on.
The letters and the pictures were emailed to the board last week.
Right. Yes.
I don't want to demolish it. I just want to enhance it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Lynn Goldman, thank you for the opportunity. That's my baby sister. Ever since she saw this house, and she's dubbed it the Cozy Cottage, and those of you that have walked by, you've seen the sign, Cozy Cottage, in front of it, and she loves it. It's my understanding that the front will look the exact same, just be pushed out 12 and a half feet. So it won't have any curb appeal difference. It will keep the same characteristics of the historic feel of the Sailboat Bend, which is what she loves so much. And I just hope that you will give her permission to enhance her Cozy Cottage.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can you please
Well,
speak
yeah,
in the mic? Because
you'll
it
have
has
to
to be on the record.
Yeah, basically any questions, the builder is here, so we can ask any questions.
Right, I
But she
just
has
wanted her
you
to
have
be on
ask
the
her
record.
mic, though. Sorry, it has to be recorded.
I just wanted to let you know that the builder is here. The architect was supposed to be here, and he's actually in the hospital. He had a
Oh.
kidney stone, but he's available by phone and is waiting by in case there's
Okay.
any questions.
Thank you. What was it? Okay. All right, with that, we'll open it up to board comment. Perhaps we started. Staff, oh, we didn't read the staff report. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Please.
All right, so UDP HP 23038 at 1205 Southwest 4th Street is a contributing structure in Sailboat Bend Historic District. They're asking for a certificate of appropriateness for major alterations, construction of a one-story addition to the front of the building. It was built in 1923, and the property boundaries were modified in 1997. At that time, the building was renovated and an addition was built to the rear. A shade structure was installed in 2016 we found through the Google photographs as a timeline. Staff has not been able to locate the permits records for the additions, alterations, canopy, or the existing fence. The shade structure's location will not be evaluated because per the zoning code, it cannot be in this location. The project proposes to demolish the existing front facade and to build an addition, increasing the front approximately 12 feet to 6 inches, 12 feet 6 inches. It will be a modified version of the existing, having a higher roof line and use fiber cement siding for the addition instead of wood, which exists on the rest of the house. To conform to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, additions should be subordinate to and be able to be differentiated from the original structure, partially when visible from the right-of-way. The addition should not be obscure, damage, or destroy significant architectural material. Whenever possible, additions should be constructed in a manner that would allow the addition to be removed without damaging the essential form and integrity of the historic building. Zoning had 3 observations. They did a precursory review as set forth in the regulations of the ULDR. Number 1, single-family residents require a minimum of 2 on-site parking spaces. Number 2, the canopy structure cannot be located, as before mentioned, within the 25-foot front yard setback. Number 3, the fence, as shown on the survey, does not comply with the code requirements. A setback of 3 feet from the property line facing a street and placement of landscaping in the required setback is required. Additionally, a 15-foot site triangle is required at the intersection of a street and an alley. These will be, we're requesting that these be rectified and addressed at the time of permitting. Staff finds that the application for a COA for major alterations under case number UDP HP 23038, located at 1205 Southwest 4th Street, partially meets the criteria as outlined in Section 472411 D3CI of the ULDR. does not meet the criteria as outlined in Section 472411D3 CII of the ULDR as specified in the staff report, and partially meets the criteria as outlined in Section 4717 of the ULDR. Elements that do not meet the criteria include removal of original materials that characterize the building, placement of a new addition on the front elevation that creates a false sense of history, is not subordinate to the original structure, and it is not differentiated from the original structure through the use of appropriate materials, massing, and placement. Elements that partially meet the criteria include fiber cement siding is not listed within the material and design guidelines. The new siding should match the existing in profile and materiality. The exterior finish of the structure needs to be cohesive as one type. The color of the glass was not identified in the windows, and the windows need to be clear with an option for a low E coating. The roof pitch is higher than the existing roof line and is not subordinate to the existing structure. The board must make a motion for approval, a motion for approval with conditions, or a motion for denial. If, however, the board adopts a motion for approval with conditions, the following conditions for the COA for major alterations are provided for consideration by the Historic Preservation Board. Number 1, all glass must be clear with an option of a low E coating, and applied muntins must have a raised profile. Number 2, the exterior finish of the structure must be wood clapboard to match the existing. Number 3, the relocation of the existing canopy is not included in the approval. Number 4, the property is located in an archaeological significant zone. No archaeological deposits are anticipated within the subject property. However, if the archaeological materials or features are discovered, then work in the vicinity of the discovery shall stop, and the city shall be notified immediately to coordinate the discovery. If unmarked human remains are encountered, then excavation in the vicinity of the find shall halt immediately, and the archaeologists shall be alerted. Shall alert the city's historic preservation staff to coordinate the discovery and take measures to implement Chapter 87205 Florida statutes as it pertains to the discovery of unmarked human remains. And number 5, this application is subject to the approval of building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements.
Thank you. Does the board, time for board comments. We'll start from this end with Shane.
I have a question for the staff. If there was to be an approval or an approval with conditions, going back to the zoning observations, the fence that's currently on the property on the street side, would that be a requirement that it be moved back? It looks like to the setback of 3 feet, and in compliance with the code as part of the approval for the new permitting?
As there were no permits found, they would have to remove it anyway to do construction, so it would be put place. And we spoke to the owner, and she was agreeable to it being put into the appropriate location.
Yeah. And the reason I ask is because I think, as was mentioned, that it is a little bit hard to see this property from the street view, given that there is a fence there. I just think that's something to keep in mind while this board considers it. And then can the property owner or the builder tell us what the plan would be with the canopy structure, that since it wouldn't fit within the required setback?
So you want to go to the mic so you're on the record?
So just to add to your comments, anytime there's a fence or a hedge in front of a property, that doesn't necessarily discount the ability to view a property.
God, I just meant from a practical matter as walking past it, just for the other members of the board that maybe haven't been by it.
You have to push the button.
Okay, sorry. No, I'll take the canopy down if that's a problem. It was there. I replaced what was already there,
Right.
but one was there.
Got it. No. Okay.
Thank you.
While you're here, can I just, did you see the conditions that the staff put in the staff report, and how do you feel about those?
We are okay with this.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Could you please state your name, sir, so the clerk can get it?
My name is Shlomo Perez.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Hearing impaired, can you spell
Shlomo Perez.
that? Can you spell it?
Yeah, SHLOMO Perez, PEREZ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Any
have
other
nothing
questions?
further.
Go ahead. Okay.
Okay, so I think this is a great example of what we're all here to do. Here's a resident who lives in the neighborhood for many years and is taking a property and doing her best to keep that character for the neighborhood. And I think we should partner with these kind of residents who, you know, they might not be able to do it 100% perfect, but, you know, our role here is to encourage historic preservation. And to me, it seems like she's doing a really good effort, and she's already spent a lot of money. If she's good with the conditions, she's got a lot of support from the neighborhood. I read all the letters that you received from your neighbors. There's also a little bit of unknown. Are we actually looking at the back of the house? You know, maybe it's not really the front of the house. So I'm inclined to approve it with conditions.
Ashley, do you have any more questions?
I don't have any questions. I agree. I agree that you know, it's tough when you're trying to improve a house, and we get folks that come along every month that you know, are trying to do their best and accommodate it. So I appreciate the homeowner's willingness. I do think there is, you know, I think the conditions are important, especially as it pertains to the wood clapboard, because that's the materials is something that we often talk about up here, about making sure that we're preserving and keeping consistent with the integrity of the original structure. So I'm inclined to support the application as well.
Thank you. Richard?
I have some more questions for the applicant. You sent a lot of pictures to us, and from the pictures, it looks significantly different than what's there today. So has the building been completely rebuilt? I mean, these pictures are from the property before?
Sorry, those are at the back of the property. That's why it looks different. The front of the property is right here.
Yep.
And that has also been changed. It notes on the report that the removal of a window on the west door.
Yep. Okay.
And the attic vent.
Okay. You might want to stay
Stay,
closer
yeah.
instead of walking back and forth. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I guess just because the property is labeled contributing, but because of all of this construction, the changes that have been done, I mean, back in 1997, I guess, I mean, it just seems like the modifications made me believe that it was really no longer contributing, just as some of these other properties that we've talked about. I mean, the lot size is smaller than what's typical. I mean, it's less than 5,000 square feet. The question I have is, it looks like there's still, with your addition, there would still be 25-foot setback from the street, okay? I do think because you're attempting to reconstruct the original facade using the similar materials, with minor adjustments in height, is not a problem because, again, as Ashley said, part of the incentives and the opportunities for properties and designated historic districts to have flexibility and understanding for the property owners, attempting to maintain the working class character and the essence of this community using the various different structural materials and home sizes of the pre-1940 period. The front facade has changed since the 1920s, so I applaud the owner's attempt to preserve it, and the current facade by extending the structure and using the fiber cement for the long term. My understanding is that fiber cement, or the hardy board, was established in the 80s, or about 40 years now, And it is seen on other contributing properties in Sailboat Bend, along with being recently approved by another applicant within the Sailboat Bend district. So I am in general in agreement with providing this applicant to go forward with some of the restrictions that are in the notes.
Thank you. Alan?
I support the application and really appreciate the owners taking the time to work with the staff, and look forward to driving by and seeing the new cozy cottage.
Thank you so much.
It's nice when everybody gets what they want and does what they're supposed to, so thank you. I
Thank you
support
so
the project.
much.
Richard, I just wanted to ask one question. You're saying the Hardy board is equivalent to what is set out on the application? It's one and the same, the cement fiber and the Hardy board?
Yeah, it's very similar to similar material.
Right. And we've approved that a number of times in the past, right? Okay. I think it's always tough.
Just to clarify,
Go ahead.
the request for the Hardy board is only for the addition. The
Right.
rest of the structure is wooden.
Right.
So it wouldn't match. It would look different.
Aesthetically?
Yes, there's different sizes.
I have to jump in here. I'm sorry, Richard.
No, go ahead.
But part of the criticism in the report is that the new edition shouldn't look like the old edition. So this will
Yeah.
make it look different. If they,
But not quite in the appropriate way.
okay.
Not in the way that
What-
our
what
Secretary
would
of
be the
Interior Standards
appropriate way?
describes.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Arthur's question, what would be the appropriate way then in an ideal scenario?
Yeah. Well, in an ideal scenario, you're not putting an addition on the front of a structure. You would
Sure.
put it in a subordinate area on the rear or the side, and you would provide a separation between the original building and the new addition. You would also use a different type of material to distinguish between the new addition and the original structure, if it's highly visible, if it's highly similar, you want to be able to differentiate it in some sort of way. When you're using two materials that are very, very similar, but somewhat different and act in different ways, that's not agreeable with the Secretary of the Interior Standards. So if you have a wood building, you wouldn't necessarily put your addition on with brick, for example, but you would use a subordinate type of material like stucco, like a concrete block. But it's a different case because you're using two different types of siding. So they look similar, but they aren't really acting in the same way.
I'm just thinking. Go ahead, Arthur. You're on the train of thought.
It's your time.
My thought is we've approved it. I think for fences, we've approved it for other siding. The only consideration I'm really weighing is the durability of it, because obviously we live in an environment where salinity is a factor, and I just don't know why we would burden the owner with the original wood if we're already making a lien that the integrity of the way this is all shaping up is not ideal. But I appreciate so much her ability to come here, put it all on the table, make as forthcoming as an application as she could possibly make. I've walked by this house numerous times. I don't know why, to revise my disclosure, I've walked by quite a few times, and it seems like it's a very it seems like everything we'd want to see, to echo one of the fellow board members, with the exception, Tricia, staff report's great, as it always is. It makes a very clear understanding of what should ideally be done, but given the circumstances with what we're working with, I think is really well done by the applicant to make it work. And I for one would be one to elect to opt away from the restriction regarding the Hardy board and to allow for it, especially with the precedent we've set in allowing it in the past.
Thank you. I know we in the past have approved projects with the Hardy board, and my concern gets back as an architect. I hate specifying anything with wood in this environment because it's not going to last. So we've talked about this before, but that's something that needs to be changed in the guidelines.
And we talked about doing Hardy board as an option for non-contributing buildings, and I believe that's when it's been approved, not necessarily in a contributing building scenario.
When you said that they would act differently, what were you referring to?
They're just two different materials,
Sure.
and so the appearance will be different.
But what?
But
Go ahead.
you'll have two different reveals. You'll have two different sizes of the siding. The hardy board generally comes in a standard size, and so it's almost more appropriate to use a different material altogether rather than trying to imitate the wood in this scenario.
You're talking about a different material for the addition.
Correct.
Okay.
If you're looking for a way to differentiate it.
So to score stucco would be better, you're saying? To score.
Right, because then it's a totally different material. It's not trying to act like a wood.
And it'd be less expensive than siding.
Would you be open to scoring stucco as a means to achieve the look? Yeah?
Okay.
Is it going to look the same if it's stucco?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not going to look exactly the same, which is the purpose.
But more similar than
Can you
artificial.
answer
Should
on
not
the,
look like
can you
the
answer on the
original.
record if you don't mind? Because we won't get that answer if you don't
We
put it on the record.
didn't. We didn't hear that.
If she wants stucco, it's no problem. But I don't like the wood because we are in Florida and we know termites and all
Exactly.
this. So it's just a time until she's going to change the
Okay.
siding
Right.
after she spend the money.
Right.
A lot of maintenance.
Okay.
So that's why we recommend to do the different way. But that was the comment.
So I wanted to get back to Tricia's comment about the stucco. That would be one way to differentiate the existing from the new. Would that, am I correct, Tricia? Because we're not quite differentiating the right thing if we do it that way. Because
Right.
typically
But
you'd
you wouldn't put an addition in this location to begin
Well,
with. So that is the first issue.
Okay, but then let me address that. This is a corner house, which always begs the question of which is the front of the house. Obviously, this looks like the front of the house, even though you said it could have been the back of the house from previous documentation. I have no problem with putting the addition where it is, only because there is no other place on the house or on the lot to do so. But I do share staff's concern about differentiating the new from the old. So no matter what you do, perhaps just a small reveal between them would differentiate, and also different materials. I think that would go a long way towards addressing staff's concern. Also, you're really recreating the existing original facade in the new facade, right? So my one comment would be you have some great pictures of the original house with that little window next to the door. If you're building it all from scratch, which you are, why not try and make the new facade as close as possible in character to the old facade? Yes. We're giving you lots of exercise today.
My only concern is the window that is, evidently the front door was moved to the west, and in doing so, when they took out that other window,
The little window. yeah.
would be what the partition is in the house
Okay.
to separate a room, so I'm scared that that might be in a way.
You could, I mean, there's ways to make it a false window, so to speak, and just have nothing behind it and just, but I mean,
Also, now we have shutters, which didn't have before, so I don't know where there would really be
are the
room.
shutters on the original house? I can't
No,
see from here.
no. No, this is 1993. I have,
Okay.
if you look at the pictures of the back of the house,
Yeah.
there was actually a screen door on the back.
Okay.
I don't know which is which.
Well, I think my main concern would be to differentiate
Okay.
the front from the house with material and some kind of break so that it's clear to somebody passing by that, wait, I have to ask Tricia something because I'm getting confused in this. Tricia, our main concern is obviously the front facade of the house. We're reconstructing this, if this passes, as a new facade to resemble the old facade, right? So would it make sense? I guess, no, pardon?
One of the criteria for us is that if we do something to a property is to reconstruct it. That's one of our options. And so that's what she's actually asking us to do, to reconstruct the front part of the house by putting an extra 20 feet or 12 feet. So,
Well, we're actually moving the front of the house.
no, you're not using those exact same materials. You might use the same windows. That would be
Yes.
ideal. Use the same windows and doors.
That's
but
the plan.
That is one of our options here, is reconstruct the architecture of the existing property.
Okay.
And so, in my opinion, as I kind of stated earlier, is like, I don't even see this as really being a contributing structure anymore. But the fact that she's trying to reconstruct it, that is one of our options. And, you can use materials that are more appropriate to get that same look or similar look that was already there.
I would be careful with the term reconstruction because in the Secretary of the Interior standards, when you look at the criteria for that, it's very specific as far as it needs to be reconstructed based on the exact dimensions of the original, not some projection of what the original was.
So what should we be calling this?
It's an addition.
Addition, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one more technical question. If we remove the restriction regarding the cement siding, the cement fiber siding, and we leave it open, does that leave the applicant with then selecting a material that's already been approved within design guidelines within Sailboat Bend, or does it have to be revised here? Just if we remove it, what happens next in their election of the material they decide to use?
If they remove the front addition or the
No.
front,
If we remove
that
that
condition.
restriction, that condition on the cement siding,
Remember-
if it were to approve with that being removed, how would that next material selection happen?
Well, the condition either could state that the applicant could work with staff to select a different material. The board can determine what that material is.
Okay.
Or the staff, or theoretically, the applicant could move forward with what's in the application.
Correct.
Right.
But that one specific material is explicitly not permitted, correct?
Right.
Within the material and design guidelines, the hardy board or the other alternative is not explicitly listed. And so that's what's stated in the staff report.
Okay.
It's also preferable with a new addition that it either uses the same material or a subordinate material. But we don't have the option for hardy board within our regulations. It's also generally not appropriate unless it's a completely new construction project.
So a question, would the scored stucco be acceptable?
I think that's a little bit better because you can start to create a reveal that's similar.
Right.
And so it's going to appear a little bit better. You can create that separation like you described just along the edges. So then you start to see that it is different from the original. It's not the original historic
You could even
property.
have the score a little bit larger so that there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to jump in here. I think that we're all trying to get to a good place and try to leave flexibility for the homeowner, which I think is the right way to go. I always personally have an issue when we're trying to design from the dais because here we are throwing out all of these different materials and we're asking an individual woman to say, oh yeah, I can do that, I can't, without really understanding the price implications and the
I
impact
think we're just
on
giving suggestions.
Right. But I guess I'm just trying to say that I think if we don't want to mandate the wood clapboard and we want to remove that, which I am supportive of removing that condition, then let's remove that condition. But to try to insert some other condition in there, as somebody that just renovated my house, if I had to sit there in front of a board and agree to different provisions on like people just don't understand what all that means and what that means from a design aspect, from a cost aspect, from what other decisions are going to be impacted from that decision. So I would just really strongly discourage us from up here trying to dictate any kind of alternative other than, like, to me, I think we either include the condition that the staff has recommended or not include it And, for discussion purposes, if you want to throw out ideas, then I guess that's fine. But I think it puts the homeowner in a very difficult situation.
Okay.
If I, so I believe there's material in 4717. So, if the board is open to it, you could just say the materials that are listed in 4717 and keep it at that, one of those materials. But I don't recommend leaving it open. If you want to remove it, that's up to you. But leaving it open,
Well, if we don't add the condition, it just means that the application could move forward as the application is, correct? So it's not like we're leaving it up for discussion. We're just saying the homeowner can move forward with the application as she stated, and we're not adding that condition onto the approval.
That's correct. So what I was addressing was really when Tricia had said that she could work with staff, so I didn't want it to be open like that. That's what I mean.
I'll move to motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions the resolution for certificate of appropriateness for major alterations under case number UDP HP 23038 located at 1205 Southwest 4th Street, based on the testimony here today, as well as some of the staff report that discusses the applicant partially meeting the criteria. And is subject to the following conditions. I would like to include the condition for all glass must be clear with an option of low coating, and applied muttons must have a raised profile. So number one. Number three, the relocation of an existing canopy structure that is not included in this approval. Number four, the fact that the property is located in an archaeological significant zone, so that if any kind of materials are discovered, that the work shall stop and city shall be notified. And then 5, that the application is subject to approval by the building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Alan.
Alan? You're our second tonight. Okay. I think we can do a hand vote.
Not hand. You got to state.
I'm sorry.
You got to state it on the record.
We have to do it. Okay. We'll do a roll call, please.
Aye.
What?
Mr. Bray?
Who are you voting for?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Masti?
Aye.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mr. Chavon?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Ms. Walker?
Yes.
And Chair Marcus?
Yes.
Passed 8-0.
Good luck. Congratulations. And Tricia, do we have anything else? We do.
Yeah, it's on the for the good of the city.
So we have it for the good of the city.
Yeah. Under the good of the city, the first item listed is the Himmershey Street, Himmershey Historic District Revitalization Project. And at your seats, each of you got a flyer this evening about the open house that we're holding next week. It's really an initial public outreach event to gather public input on what the neighborhood and the stakeholders within the area would like to see as far as improvements for this district are concerned. So the open house is between 4 to 6 p.m. It's just come and go as you please. And we'd be looking for input from the people within the area and the visitors. So far we've had some one-on-one meetings with some stakeholders. We've met with the DDA, the Historical Society, the Riverwalk Inc., MODS, the Broward Performing Arts Center, and Commissioner Glassman. And we wanted to just kind of reach out to the Historic Preservation Board too with this information. And if you have any initial feedback that you'd like to share at this time, we'd be happy to accept it. We also have an interactive map that's available on the website. If you use the QR code, it will take you to our website where you can enter any information or feedback there. You can also come to the event, just don't talk to each other. and or verbally here or at any time to me. You can always submit any feedback to me directly. But we do have a consultant that we're working with who is going to prepare a report for us following this event and combine all the feedback that we've received so far and kind of create a strategy for us to move forward. So this is a very initial first step in our in this project.
Great.
Any questions?
Moving west, when does the H1 district end?
It ends, well, like at the OB house.
Okay.
It did incorporate the property across the street from the OB house before, which was the old post office, but that was demolished years ago and isn't included any longer.
So it stops like before mods? It does stop there?
Yeah, it stops there, the H1 district.
Okay.
We'll be looking at pretty much the extent of Southwest 2nd Street to 7th Avenue, and then all of the H1 district. So the portion of the H1 district that extends into the riverfront.
Great. Love it.
And I want to piggyback off that a little bit. I know this meeting's been long already, so we might just put a motion for next week to talk about this, or next month. But with the H1 district and the Sailboat Bend Historic District, I think that because we're not doing charrettes, I'd like to continue to bring revitalization, renewed life to what the planning and zoning could consider and bridging some of these things between H1 and the Sailboat Bend District. So like planning and zoning, as we talked about earlier tonight, with adaptive reuse of properties for tax incentives on income-producing properties, by considering making West Los Olas and Tequesta and Sailboat Bend Historic District as mixed use. That would allow some of these property owners to get that tax incentive and bring some of those things into an opportunity for boutique shops or pedestrian pathways to talk about the history of Sailboat Bend and extend it beyond H1 and Stranahan House. So again, I can talk about these things. I got several list of things, but I would make a motion, I guess, to put this on next month's agenda to talk about the planning and zoning aspect of it more.
Question.
Is that a motion?
For further discussion now if you want it, but.
I have a question. You're talking about the planning and zoning aspects of extending the district?
Not extending the district, but mixed use. So it's not just residential properties anymore, that you'd be able to have small businesses in these places.
I just have a question for Tricia and the Assistant District Attorney. Is this a question rightfully for this board, or would this go to the zoning board?
Yes, the Planning and Zoning Board really is the appropriate board to opine on the rezonings to make them mixed use, et cetera, and the land use plan amendments, not this board.
But this board would make a recommendation or request with the city commissioners to have a discussion or to hire consultants to do the work. So that's the discussion, to make the recommendation from the historic preservation to renewed life for historic preservation of the city. You have to make it more visible in order to make a difference. And this is just what's happening, is we're not really revitalizing the neighborhood. So you've already got the Himmershey district coming before with the revitalization plan. So I'm trying to discuss further about how you're going to bring the rest of the district or the area into, like, instead of it being just a cultural gateway, cultural arts gateway, you make it a cultural heritage gateway that extends into Sailboat Bend. So you have more of an opportunity when you change some of the planning and zoning. I mean, that it's not just the mixed use, but it could be like for accessory dwellings, change some of the rooms for this district or this area. You know, there's plenty of other things that can be done up and down Avenue of the Arts to make it more relatable to some of the businesses and things that bridge the two communities together. So that's what I'm talking about, having a further discussion about it. So we can actually make a proposal or a recommendation to the commissioners.
This board is free to do what it wants. I just,
Yeah.
about other, there's different aspects of this board versus the other one. I'm happen to be the board attorney for both. So, you're free to do what you like to do. So if you want to do a motion, go ahead.
My motion is to put this agenda on the agenda next month to further talk about planning and zoning options and recommendations for the city to consider whether or not some changes to the zoning for Sailboat Bend and H1 district to consider hiring a consultant for that revitalization consideration.
I have a question, comment. I'm concerned that the city attorney has said that this should go to planning and zoning, because I'm concerned that I don't think we on this board may have enough knowledge as to what should be. I think it's a good idea, but I agree with the city attorney that we're not the ones to make this determination.
I'm looking at it like it's a suggestion, not a determination, that we just continue this conversation. And that's one of the things of many more that will come out in a open table conversation about what we might suggest to revitalize the Himmershey district. At one time, that area was really depressed, and then it became on fire. It was really happening. And now I think it's needing a haircut and a shave and a shoe shine again. So whatever we can do to stimulate some growth down there, and it may be perhaps we need to skip the actual request for planning and zoning and take that out of the request and just say whatever it takes.
Right, so maybe I'm phrasing it
Including but not limited to.
Richard, can I just make a suggestion? Perhaps you should frame it like this. In accordance with the Historic Preservation Board's powers with 4732(3), subsection A, 7, initiating plans for the preservation and rehabilitation of individual historic buildings, you make the following motion. Next, your cue.
Well, before I do that, thank you very much. But a little bit of this is more to direct the commissioners to hire a consultant to do the research to evaluate planning and zoning as one of the issues to help this neighborhood become more visible for the city of Fort Lauderdale. Because if you ask most people in the city of Fort Lauderdale, they don't even know there's much of a history, let alone historic district. So it's trying to bring attention to it. And in order for that to happen, since we're not having a charrette, it's requesting an outside consulting company to come in to do that for us, to get the ball rolling.
I thought your zoning reference was a good one. I could think of a very simple way to create a lot of monetary incentive to invest in that area. And it would be an implementation of using that H1 aspect, but also maybe leaving there to be what's going on in the rest of the theme with the city, which is a lot of vertical, intense density. And it's on the border of it, but Sherry, I would ask you, I don't know where we intersect here, where we're becoming HPB and P&Z.
That is the closest I could get with what I read, because the boards, nothing else apply with what this board is supposed to be doing other than preservation and rehabilitation. That's why I mentioned it. So I'm trying to avoid the planning and zoning aspect of it. So just to be clear, in 4731, because like I said, I'm the planning and zoning board attorney. So it says, Planning and Zoning Board shall act as the advisory capacity to the City Commission to conduct investigations and hold public hearings upon all proposals to change zoning regulations of the city or to vacate land, abandon streets, etc. And they're to study existing city plans with the view of improving the same, to provide for development, general improvement, etc. So I'm trying to get you to that other language, if that's that's why I'm doing that, essentially.
It's a good bridge.
So yeah. So in other words, what I just read was the Planning and Zoning Board's purpose versus yours, which is the closest to what Richard was saying, is preservation and rehabilitation. Planning and Zoning Board, their purpose is development, general improvement, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just trying to make sure boards kind of stay in their lane, just to be respectful, but yeah.
Not to prolong the meeting, but Tricia, what's the point blank idea of this revitalization plan at the moment? I mean, what's the city's master plan as it stands to try to?
For the Himmershey area?
Yeah, for the
Well, that's
Himmershey.
part of this exercise, is to make a determination on what the members of the community are
Yeah.
interested in seeing first, and to
Yeah.
prioritize those efforts, and to kind of create a strategic plan to move forward.
City doesn't have a stance at the moment without that involvement from
No.
constituents.
No, not necessarily. I mean, we've heard feedback from the community before. We are just trying to organize that effort and
I think it's great.
to formalize the feedback in a way that can be utilized as a productive document.
So I have one comment on Richard's suggestion. Would the suggestion be better made to the Planning and Zoning Board?
So it wouldn't be appropriate for this board to make that suggestion to another board. The only way to do that would be going through a communication to the city commission, and they can decide if they want to take that communication and then direct the city manager through staff to go ahead and do it. I just recommend leaving the words planning and zoning out of it, because then automatically folks are going to think,
So I'm not sure how to phrase it at this point or what we should do, because that's just.
I thought I gave it to you.
I know, but I don't have it in front of me to repeat it. So
Okay, I can repeat it. Okay, I'm trying to help. So, okay. All right. So this board, right? I'm reading from 4732.3 of the ULDR, and it states that this board has the following kinds of powers, including but not limited to. And it mentions initiating plans for the preservation and rehabilitation of individual historic buildings. So, without stating planning and zoning, you wish to make the following motion?
Well, I don't want to specify specific buildings.
Oh, no, you don't have to.
Okay.
You don't have to. You
Okay,
can
so-
state what you were saying, H1, all that stuff. It's just, I just wanted you to,
Okay, so if I can use your exact phrasing you
Yes.
had there at the end,
Yes.
and just say, for the H1 and Seattle Bend historic districts, and bridging those, that was what my proposal would be, my motion.
Yes. So the next question I have before we get to a second is that usually what happens is the city commission likes to hear from a board member to explain exactly what their motion is. So I think the best person would be Richard, but I don't want to volunteer you, so it's up to you. But just to explain your motion, because sometimes when it's read on paper, folks don't get it. So, just something to consider, not forcing you or anything. I'll bow out now.
Yes, that would be fine.
So just to be, for my clarity, it'd be to initiate plans to preserve and rehabilitate structures in the Sailboat Bend Historic District along West Las Olas for the purpose of adaptive reuse, or the potential for adaptive reuse.
I don't want to limit it to that, but that's just part of the expansion of adaptive reuse for some of these properties. There's plenty of other things. That's why I brought up planning and zoning, because look, there's all these alleys that could be looked at as, vacant land that's not being used, and rezoning that for parks and recreation, or not limiting the accessory dwellings to 600 square feet, 900 square feet for the historic district. There's plenty of pieces of discussion that goes into that. So it's a revitalization conversation and not just limited to specific buildings.
Okay.
Does that help?
Well, as long as you explained it to the commission, I was just trying to help. Yeah. So you just need a second at this point, and then,
I'll second.
Ready?
Well, I have to say, I'm not clear at all.
I'm not either.
The last statement was very, very brief about.
Could we repeat
for
the whole
the
thing?
H1
Because I'm
and
confused.
Sailboat Bend historic districts.
Okay, so I'll just make it simple. In accordance with the Historic Preservation Board's powers under 4732(3)(a)(7) to initiate plans for preservation and rehabilitation of individual historic buildings, the motion is to direct communication to the City Commission to consider, Tricia, I'll let you state the area, to consider revitalization project along the
West Las Olas section within the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
I wasn't trying to limit it to that. So you just say the Sailboat Bend Historic District.
Yes, okay.
Because then you can kind of narrow it down with the conversation with the commissioners or with a consulting company that comes in to do the work.
So Sailboat Bend and H1, right?
Correct.
I know you mentioned H1, okay.
It would include H1?
That's what I heard him say, but I don't want to.
I'm trying to bridge them because you're talking about historic preservation, and in order to bring the arts and cultures into cultural heritage, that's what it becomes. You're bridging the two.
Okay. So we got that, right? Not the last part. We were just talking. That wasn't a part of the motion. But it's just in accordance with the powers that I read for the city commission to consider a revitalization project along H1 and the historic and the Sailboat Bend Historic District. And then Richard will explain the rest. So you just stop the motion there.
And this would most likely be on the December 5th City Commission conference agenda.
All right, so we need to take a vote. We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll re-second, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Congratulations. And with that, is there anything else, Tricia?
The board had made a motion at the last meeting to have the continued board discussion of historic preservation incentives on this agenda. So that is on the agenda as well.
Okay.
That's part of what I kind of brought up now. So
Right. I'm just wondering, since it's been a long meeting, perhaps we can table that till next time.
Second.
Okay.
So at this time, and I can't make any guarantees, we don't have any applications for the December meeting.
Oh.
So
Good, we'll have a long discussion.
would you like to still have the meeting to have the discussion regardless of whether or not there's...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
I agree.
Okay.
Is the application deadline passed for submission?
It has passed, but
You know how that goes.
on occasion, we're told otherwise. So,
Okay.
but at this time, we do not have any complete applications.
Okay.
okay, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Hallelujah.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I didn't get to watch the whole game. I saw the highlights, though, man. Those Birds had quite a game last night. Yeah. Good for you.